Okay, are we ready back there yet, or still need a few minutes? Okay,
Half a minute.
that's all right. Just give me a thumbs up when we're ready.
Sure. Okay, we're ready.
Okay. Welcome to the Waunakee Community School District Board of Education regular meeting. The date is Monday, November 14th of 2016. We started at 6:30 p.m., went into closed session for items appropriate for closed session. It is now 7:20 and we are back in open session. Before we get started, I would like everyone to rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance in honor of our Veterans Day. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First of all, item 6, approval of minutes. You have in your packet minutes for the October 10th and October 24th special meeting for review and approval.
Move approval of the minutes as submitted. Second.
Moved by Julie, seconded by Joan. Any discussion, questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Also, before we get started, I'd like to announce we have some new videographers with us this year, student videographers. Garrett Stolen is back there right now, and then we will also be joined by Alex Tweed. And so for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, but I have the opportunity to view these meetings online at a later date, we do have videographers that tape the meetings, and often fortunate to have students who are playing that role for us. So welcome to the Board of Education meetings, Garrett. Okay, are there any changes to the agenda?
Nope, as written.
Motion to approve of the agenda.
So move. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Item 8. This is the item where individuals from the public may comment on any items on tonight's meeting agenda. I don't have any notes in front of me, but is there anybody out there who wishes to address the board? Okay, hearing none, you have the opportunity each month to do so. Thank you. Item 9. Administrative reports, items, starting with our students' reports, Amanda and Michaela.
Okay, so we haven't done that many events in student council since then, but since the last time we came here, but we will have a meeting on Wednesday to discuss some new activities. But for now, a couple weeks ago we did an open mic night where if any students wanted to come and share like a talent that they have, like playing an instrument or singing, and people can come to watch, and it's like it's really cool to see everyone come out and perform and see talents that we didn't know that other people had. So it was a cool event. A lot of people came out to see them.
And then just this past Monday, there was a glow-in-the-dark dodgeball tournament, and you created your own team. It was really cool. They had like all the lights set up, and like all the balls would glow, and they had like a huge what's it called? Like bracket? Yeah, where the teams move on. So it was like a huge competition, and everyone competed. It was raising money for cancer, so that was really cool.
And then this past week on Monday, we went to a student council conference called the Fall Summit, where we got to meet with other student councils, like Sun Prairie and other schools, to see what kind of events that they do in their school. So we had different like breakout sessions where we discussed like new things that we could have in our school. And one of the things that we mainly saw that could be a cool idea is during like our contact time, just having like a voice to talk to, and like from us, like the students' perspectives, to talk to other students to see what they think of like different activities going on in school, instead of having like teachers and stuff hear about it. So we thought that maybe that would be a cool idea to share.
And then also we have a volleyball tournament coming up in the school, and that's also like the dodgeball where you create your own team. And that money's been donated to Isabel and I, so everyone just made their volleyball team together, and like the dodgeball, you just all compete against each other, and everyone like dresses up and has their own team theme, and it's really fun. So yeah, that's about it for this month.
Any questions?
How much are you raising when you do like your dodgeball? What gets donated?
Student council wasn't the leader, we didn't set up this event, we just helped with it, and a lot of the people participated in it, so I don't really know the outcome of that one. But I would say the volleyball teams is usually $35 to $45 per team that enters, and usually you can donate more, so depending on how many teams, it
We
just
usually
varies.
get a lot of teams, so
Yeah.
we bring a good amount of money that we donate.
Any other comments?
So there's gambling involved.
No, it's called an entry fee, right?
Yeah.
It's a fundraiser.
Oh, it always is.
That's right.
Last month you talked about a blood drive. Have you set that up?
No, we haven't set that up. I'm guessing we'll should be talking about that at the meeting we have Wednesday or after, because I think our first one's gonna be December, so we didn't quite talk about that one yet.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
All right,
ladies.
Thank you.
See you next month then. Item B, board reports, starting with item 1. Anybody has anything they would like to share with other board members on items, either events they, or meetings they attended, or things around the district or otherwise? Julie?
I got to attend the staff PBIS training on October 27th. They met at the newly revised and renovated space at Heritage Elementary. There were teams of staff and administration from each of the buildings represented, and a person from CISA was helping them to launch that behavioral support system consistently across our district, and it just was really fun and exciting because it's another one of these areas where the ideas and how it's run and how it's to be implemented building to building. Yes, there's a framework to do it, but each building and individual staff members were contributing for what they thought made sense for their building with their climate and their students and what was going on. So it gave a great overview. I was glad I had the time to be able to go and just sit and listen. It was great.
Anybody else? Jack?
I attended the MadRep board meeting in the Innovation Center with Randy this last Friday, I believe it was. And they have a board makeup of economic development, business people, and WDC members, and everybody was duly impressed with what the team has done to put the Innovation Center together.
And what was the reason they chose to have their meeting here, or what?
I think they moved the meetings around, and I think that they had WEDC is launching their next round of Fab Lab grants. So that
Which we
was-
got one last year.
Which we received one last year, and they were familiar with our space and impressed with kind of how it came together. So they held this was their meeting that they just held in our space. So it was very nice. We had a chance to give them a tour and talk to them and interact with a number of folks. So real positive.
Anybody else? Okay. On to item number 2. Spring board election. In your packets, you'll see the notice of the spring upcoming board election for April of 2017. We have 2 members on the board whose terms are up, and it would be Joan Ensign from Westport and Julie Weiner from Waunakee. Basically, this announcement is that anybody else who may be interested in running for the Board of Education for those seats, there's information available from the district office. You can circulate your papers starting December 1st, and the papers are due January 3rd. That's for those of you who are interested in running the school board. And then also in the packet is a notification of non-candidacy for those individuals whose seats are up. If they choose not to run, they have until December 23rd to fill out a piece of paper saying, I choose not to run. So that gives individuals at least a couple of weeks to possibly raise their hand and run for the seats. Okay, on to item number C, strategic planning.
Our first item on our strategic planning discussions tonight is a follow-up on the district wellness clinic recommendation. You've heard a few different updates over the course of the last number of months, the last one I believe in September. where you've asked for some additional information in some areas as far as the siting of the clinic and wanting us to really bring back information with regards to that, along with our recommendation again. So that is what particularly Connie and Steve have been really heading up in our district. Dr. Random, I thank you for being here. And I guess I'm going to turn it over to Steve and to Connie to really walk us through the presentation this evening and the recommendation at hand.
All right, thank you, Randy. I'm going to walk us through the presentation, but at any point, other members of the team that helped put this together, Dr. Annam, Allie, or Connie Beth, would be more than happy to also address any questions or share any information that I didn't cover.
I do have one quick question. This was presented to the budget committee, and then basically you're going to be looking for action for sources of funds and also possibly to implement this, right, recommendation?
Yes, our request is to seek approval tonight from the board to move forward with a trial wellness clinic that
Okay.
would run from approximately January 2017 to June 2018.
Okay, so this will be an action item.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So the items that we really would like to cover with you tonight is, first of all, where this connects to our strategic plan, the location options that we reviewed as a team to get to where we are tonight for the recommendation, the services that would be offered in a wellness clinic, the costs that are involved, what the administrative recommendation is, and what the next steps would be if the school board votes to approve for us to move forward with this. To start with, you've seen the district strategic planning document during these presentations before. We wanted just to reiterate where this topic connects in with the district strategic planning. It's under the human resources section of the plan. There's a health clinic model box or area of emphasis that we've been working on for quite some time, and that's how it connects into the overall district strategic plan. The objectives of what we were trying to accomplish when we set out to tackle this topic are listed here. I'm not going to read them, but basically at a fundamental level, we're looking to create a value-added benefit to the district staff, a no-cost option that converts a fee for service, basically a fee to our health care plan into a fixed cost. This type of model has been very successfully implemented in other parts of the state and in many private business settings, but it has not yet been implemented in this portion of the state in a public school setting. And we'll get into that when we move into the discussion. The partnership with Dean, we talked a little bit about this in previous month presentations, kind of how this has evolved over a period of time. Recently, there's been a significant emphasis on the wellness end of the health insurance program. Locations considered. Connie, Al, and I spent quite a bit of time looking through options out in the community, as well as we looked at some options inside the school district, which we'll go over in just a moment. When we looked out in the community, we decided to look at locations that were for sale. We looked at older locations, we looked at newer locations, basically anywhere that we thought that might be a fit for holding a clinic inside of that particular rental space, we tried to take a look at. While we were looking at the locations identified here on the screen, we had a list of factors that were important for us to consider in each of these locations. As an example, ADA accessibility. Whatever location we ended up selecting has to be available and accessible to those who are going to use it. Another item on here is image, curb appeal, access, location. Because this clinic would be a voluntary clinic, it needs to be in a location that staff feel comfortable going to. So we needed to look at a number of factors, all identified on this screen, in our search for what would be the most appropriate location to host a clinic of this site. We narrowed it down to a couple of choices internally and one choice out in the community. The choices internally were at the former intermediate school front office and the former intermediate school band room. We're labeling it that way because we thought it might be easier for you to visualize where it is. Those are the spaces we looked at inside school facilities. And then we narrowed it down to the former Garden Terrace location at the Arboretum Center when we looked at community locations. For the intermediate school, former intermediate school locations, we met with Findorf and the principal of the school, as well as Connie and myself, to walk through the spaces to really make sure we were addressing the needs of that space. For the principal of the school, it was very important that if there was going to be a clinic hosted inside a school, that it needed to be what we were referring to as a building within a building concept, meaning the same safety and security measures we have in place for our students at all of our facilities would be in place at Heritage. So it was important to make sure that the clinic was not something that you just walked in an entrance up into the second stairwell and you could go anywhere throughout the school. That added cost. We wanted to make sure that there was only one location in, one location out, and it was important for the principal that you could not leave the clinic, enter the school site, and be able to walk throughout the school. So looking at that approach, the cost from Findorf, again, this is not a bid, this was a give us an idea of what it would take to meet those requirements in this space. For the front office was in the end approximately a little over $500,000. And in the back of the school, and this is what it would generally look like. So this was a diagram that we were working off of as to how we could convert that space into a clinic, a wellness clinic. In the back of the school, there are more significant access issues to try to get in and out of the back of the school. And those issues would likely add about $300,000 to the cost of getting a space really accessible to those who would need to use it, as well as making sure you can only go in and out of one location in the back. So the back of the school is quite a bit more difficult than it would be in the front. The community location that we honed in on, for those of you who are familiar with the restaurant that was in place a few years ago called Garden Terrace, it's in the lower right-hand side of the picture is where the Garden Terrace restaurant was. In that location, to convert the space over to a wellness clinic would have an initial investment of about $70,000, $25,000 for furniture and equipment, which would go with any of the proposals, and then a lease cost of a little over $2,000 per month. The investment at this location would be about $131,000 for the 18-month trial period. This is the floor plan of what that space would actually look like upon completion. For those of you familiar with that space, you would know that there are some things that would need to be done to it to turn it from the restaurant location into a clinic location. One of the main advantages of this location, first of all, is the accessibility. There's an elevator in the building. There's also a ramp that already exists for people to go down the side of the building. The lighting is outstanding at that facility, as well as just the overall curb appeal. It's a very nice location that would be very attractive for folks to go to, very convenient. So as far as the cost on the actual build-out piece of building the clinic, about $500,000 for the front of the former intermediate school space, about $800,000 in the back, and a little over $130,000 for the rental property. We've talked about this approach before. This approach really shows the wellness clinic at the center of what it is that we are trying to accomplish. The wellness clinic being a dedicated 40-hour-a-week medical professional who has the ability to provide a number of services to the staff and their families of the district. The expenses of running a wellness clinic are identified on this slide. A physician assistant or nurse practitioner would be posted upon school board approval. The clinical director is Dr. Annam. Dean would use their call center services for staff who would like to schedule appointments. Labs would be included in the wellness center. Equipment rental, data phone, miscellaneous, with a total of approximately $15,000 per month to run the wellness clinic, or about $270,000 over the entire 18-month trial period. The targeted services really fall into two different types of categories. The first one you would see on the screen here. These are medical services that people would often go to, maybe an urgent care if they needed to quickly get in and see a doctor, or their own doctor at the clinic that they happen to go to on a regular basis. These are services that could be performed by a nurse practitioner or physician's assistant at the wellness clinic. So for the staff who would choose to go to this location, as opposed to like an urgent care, there would be no copay for the staff member on our health plan or their family to go and have these services, medical services provided for them. The district's health plan would then not receive the charge for those services being performed because we are paying for them on a fixed cost basis. So all of those charges that used to go to, an example, the urgent care to our health plan would no longer do so. They would be converted over to a fixed cost. But the second major piece of what we'd be trying to accomplish is really overall health and wellness. Because this individual is there for 40 hours a week, they will be managing the care of many of the staff in the district who need additional assistance, whether it's diabetes or some other similar long-term medical issue where they are requiring and requesting additional assistance. The wellness piece and working with our staff to make sure they are as healthy as they can be in providing the services is a significant piece of this proposal. It's the services listed here are a part of it, but the wellness piece is hopefully an even larger part. How does this integrate with what we're currently doing? In the last year and a half, we've made significant progress with the Wellness Committee. As you know, the board has changed the policy for staff for things like using the pool, the intermediate school fitness center. Prize sponsors have been provided for different activities. The dean nurse coaching is off the ground and running. Our current dean nurse coach Jessie has received many positive comments from our staff as to the services that she's providing for them. We share Jessie with the Sun Prairie School District, so between our two school districts, she is working with the staff in both districts to help folks with their medical needs. We talked about the handbook change that the board approved last summer, which is part of our goal to seek 100% participation in annual biometric and health assessments that creates the most effective wellness program. And our health contract with Dean has implications depending on what level we're able to reach for participation. So the clinic really is just a part of many other initiatives that we are trying to work on in the wellness area. The recommendation from the administration is to request approval on a trial basis of the wellness clinic from January of 2017 to June 30th of 2018. We want to be able to prove to you that this concept can work. We want to come back to you and show you the data and show you the information before we commit to something like this on a 5 or 7 year type basis. So because of our recommendation to approach this as a trial, we're recommending a lease at the Arboretum Center space because we think it is the most cost-effective option and the quickest option to be able to get a wellness clinic up and running. Our goal is to actually have something available to staff to use as early as January of 2017. The total cost would be a little over $400,000 for an 18-month trial period, a $221,000 cost this fiscal year, and a $180,000 cost next fiscal year. For those of you who can remember, back in January of 2016, we presented a long-term financial planning document to you that actually estimated a $400,000 cost to implement a trial for this program. So in the end, depending on which route we would go with location, if we rent a space, we would be very close to that. If approved by the board, what would come next? We would sign the lease, we would begin the remodel of the space. And just a quick point I would mention, we will have the option to renew the lease if we so choose. So as an example, if we can prove that this concept is effective and we've already invested the $70,000 in this space, the board could choose to re-up for additional 1-year terms that would be a part of our agreement. We would hire the nurse practitioner or physician assistant with oversight from Dr. Annam and feedback from the district. We would work collaboratively with the wellness clinic team to finalize the clinic startup. The targeted launch date would be potentially one of the no school days to try to hold an open house so our staff could get over and see what the facility's all about. And then, as I mentioned, the review process is very important. We are estimating that in March of 2018, we would evaluate the clinic design, the effectiveness, and the future of that type of a model. And please remember, our Dean long-term contract expires on June 30th, 2018, which would allow us to look at this concept in the larger picture of where our Dean contract or whatever path we go, we can evaluate it. The clinic in the long run would clearly need to be self-supported, meaning we would need to be able to prove to you that there are enough savings from operating this type of a clinic to offset the cost. One thing to keep in mind is when you get something like this up and running, there's no way to have this be integrated into our initial claims renewal because they go back over a 12-month period of time. So these type of models do require an upfront investment initially to prove that they will work before the claims end up being reduced. And then a health plan design review would be appropriate at that time to better integrate the clinic if we choose to continue that concept moving forward. At this point, I know Dr. Annam, Al, Connie, myself would be happy to address any of the questions that you might have regarding this topic, and thank you for your time.
I do know also this was presented to the budget committee as well. Are there any comments that members of the budget committee have as a result of their initial, I guess, discussion?
It was presented, but not all this was presented.
Oh, I see, okay.
We didn't see all that.
Okay.
We got presented a cost estimate, which I assumed was personnel and how it was gonna go.
Okay.
We didn't know that options to that magnitude were looked at.
I just saw in the notes that there was.
The conversations that took place at the budget committee were around the dollars to get the clinic started
The
and
person.
the location of those, and we talked about fund balance, utilization of that. And then the aspects as far as the costs associated with the different options here, we're coming in preparation for tonight.
I think one important piece just to add is administration rarely recommends the use of fund balance. This is my 16th year here, and the only other time we recommended fund balance was actually the purchase of this facility. So when we purchased this facility, it was a combination of a non-referendum loan and fund balance in order to remodel it. That initial investment to get this facility where we wanted it to be. So recommendations to use fund balance are very rare, and recommendations to use fund balance typically come when it's an initial investment in order to get something up and running. We would not recommend an investment of this type from fund balance on an ongoing long-term basis. But just in general, the way healthcare works, in order to have something like this affect your claims and your premiums in a positive way, you have to invest in it up front. And that's typical with any wellness clinic, no matter what part of the state that you would be doing. You have to put some outlay first in order to do it. Our goal has been to minimize that outlay so that we can prove the concept works in this part of the state and in public schools. Al could speak to this way better than I can, but this concept has been extremely successful in the Milwaukee area, the Fox Valley area, and other portions of the state. It's a little bit delayed in coming to this part of the state because our healthcare premiums are lower in Dane County than they are in Milwaukee or other portions of the state. We know there are other school districts in the Dane County area exploring this, but we're the first ones to actually have a proposal out in front of our school board.
If I can add something, Steve, at the September meeting when we brought this forward, that was really built off the premise of most likely leasing the space. And what the feedback we received from the board at that time was to bring this back with some options with regards to keeping it in-house. Part of the reason we had thought we had kind of moved away from that in September was we didn't have the numbers to an in-house piece, but we felt that those spaces didn't necessarily, in our vision, fit with what we were trying to accomplish. But per your request, that's really what's coming back here tonight. So I guess when we take a look at our dialogues that took place at our different committee meetings, we could have filtered some of those pieces in here, and that may have helped some of the dialogue here tonight. So if there is a point where you're taking a look at this, you're feeling like that's just too new of information for a decision, we could move this until, and use this as an informational piece this evening, and move the decision to December. It just moves out our implementation of the clinic by a month or so, if that's the direction we want to go. But tonight's presentation is really kind of a follow-up to our September piece with some additional information, the additional, I guess, discussion that's taking place between all the folks who've been at the table.
Well, and I do appreciate your including all the different components that already are in place or ongoing, and this is just another component of it. Because I know even at some of the listening sessions I've attended, when I see some head nods, unsolicited positive comments coming from staff already with some of the ability to access services through what currently exists, which is nothing like the model where it is. Okay, I guess dialogue. Yeah, Julie?
Yeah, a couple of questions for clarification. So the nurse practitioner or physician's assistant that works there is the Waunakee School District employee? Is this correct?
The person would be hired by Dean, and they would be a Dean employee.
Okay.
So, great question. On the slide where we referenced the cost of running a clinic, and it was about $15,000, that would be a payment from the school district to Dean to pay for the services. So, for example, the nurse practitioner, physician's assistant, the medical oversight from Dr. Annam, the lab supplies, that would be paid from us directly to Dean on a monthly basis.
I guess I saw a kind of a reaction from Dr. Random. Did you want to make a comment at all? I mean, I see you as a clinical director.
Part of it is, to me, the.
If you can come up to the mic, that'd
Oh,
be great. And-
Great.
Sorry.
Just so it records for
Camera
the
is 50 pounds.
And this is Dr. Ren, you've been identified as the clinical director.
Yes, so part of the process, and now obviously know some of this too, is that having the PA or whoever you wanna make sure that they're competent and that they follow our standardized stuff. They wouldn't be on as much of an island, does that make sense?
That's what I wanted to
Right,
clarify, was
So
hopeful,
we're
yes.
trying to keep them into the main flow of what we do with everybody else, as far as PAs, docs, everybody else, that they're certified, appropriate, and obviously the district would have a component of that as far as, you know.
So to follow up and related to that, but there would just be one employee at that location, correct?
Correct.
The scheduling would be from some off-site number they're calling that's
Correct.
doing the scheduling, and it would,
Right, right, we have scheduling services that we use for other sites that exist, I mean, so that part of the pile you shouldn't have to deal with very much. I mean, it would kind of come down to what the district wishes to do. I suspect that like Jessie would have people that she would say, hey, you know what, you're going in there, and that might be a local call, not through to me, the benefit of this is that it's local calls. You know, like, you don't look well, you're going over there. I mean, it just speeds the line.
yeah, I guess my concern was, what if you get 2 or 3 at once? And you got the one PA that's back in the exam room with somebody
Our
else, and,
experience, as far as at the clinic, is that you won't have, that the line will still be quite short
Okay.
for the population that you have, as far as that you're trying to serve, and I don't have an exact number on that. I think it was around 1,000, is that correct?
Mhm.
Or somewhere around there. So that line, one person should be able to serve that line easily, because most of the work, and not all the work will be going through them. You know, if they had to do all the work, that would be, but some of the work will be sent out to
got it.
other sites.
Okay, but
So-
others can't, so like they'll be re-sterilizing all the surfaces themselves, they'll be restocking
Right.
all the
Oh, yeah,
supplies
that's-
themselves, they'll
I
be
think
ordering
in
all
the
the.
schedule, as I see it, I don't think that's
It's gonna
gonna be a difficult. Our clinical people, again, the reason to have Dean is the clinical people come and say, here's the process you need
Yep.
to use. Cause
So
then
they
the
would
school
know.
would have to invent that.
Okay.
Now, I think it could be done that way, but it would take somebody taking over that process, and I don't know, I don't wanna do it.
No, that's what, I thought it was gonna complicate who to hire,
Right, yeah, so
so
that's using
it's good to have those answers.
using the processes that are already used by other places.
Sure.
I mean, at our other sites is what I
Sure.
expect would happen, so. I think it's, an excellent, again, speaking unquestioned, I mean, as far as the wellness thing, I think that is, a big piece of this as far as the long run. I would be jealous of the ability to contact these people. No, we don't have that, that's, you'd be ahead of us there.
Thank you. Okay,
How many people do you think would go through here on a daily basis? You know, would go through, you know, I would assume that there's a ramp up where there's a few people initially and then more and more people get comfortable with it.
Al, could you speak to your experience in other locations? If you wanna come
And,
to the mic?
and I guess the next question,
Kinda go
the
there.
follow-up question to that then would be, the space that has been identified, you know, is that a long-term space, or would you have to expand that space?
I'll tag team this if you don't mind. As far as the ramp up, one of the things you may recall on the wellness component, which was part of what was drafted in the HR handbook,
Right.
was the participation in the biometrics, which when you are managing a population that is just the staff members and their spouses and their dependents in a district, you now have a population of information that, you know, individuals, while they complete that biometric, may very well have this nurse practitioner with them. I know, for example, when you conducted them this past year voluntarily, struggling with the word, you had the nurse liaison there helping talk through, and possibly if people had questions, they could ask them about what my cholesterol, et cetera. My point to that is, it wouldn't be just those individuals that would just think, I have a condition, do I want to go to the local clinic? The other way is, it's kind of a step ahead of what would be deemed traditional primary care, where you also have individuals that are collecting data earlier, and you have a nurse practitioner collecting data earlier, that they can share and start coaching. So it's not just the reactive, I have a condition, we're now trying to create just an earlier step where people are getting more information, we're getting hopefully 100% participation, and as a result, it's just that much more proactive in communication. So back to the history of it, when you have those components, which you know, as we see them piecing together, it shortens the ramp-up period of time just because they're actively engaged early. Does
So
that
when
help
you
answer
open-
your question?
When you open January 16th or 19th, the next day, are you gonna have 5 people in there?
No.
1 person, 10 people?
Oh,
And then it ramps up to
So
100?
An estimate that we use at our clinic is 1% per day for urgencies. I mean, so
Okay.
that's, so I would say 10. I mean, that's, and you count the weekends, maybe 12, depends on, that would be, but it'll vary, depends when the flu comes, right?
Yeah.
Those-
And then, is this a 40-hour work week for this individual, or is there nights and weekend coverage, or, you know, how does that work?
the initial setup, I think, that the clinic was talking about was 11 to 7.
Yeah, right, and that, I think, is open, I didn't know if we closed that, I don't know if we've talked about the 40 hours. It depends on, I think that would depend, again, speaking off turn here, but that would depend on sort of what the district found the demand was at. I mean, this type thing, we would adjust it to demand, you know, when I personally don't know whether mornings is better than night. I feel that 7 is a little late for most of us, because at our other sites, usually by 6, most everybody wants their kids in their house and doors closed, so. But that's, I mean, I think they'd be open to whatever the fluctuation.
So the 18 months would just be to kind of gauge utilization and work out scheduling and things like that?
And to Steve's point too, a couple things with the 18 months, not only to feel things out, get everything up and running, but as of July of 2019,
I think it was 18, it's the
18,
same year.
I'm
yeah.
just, July of 2018 would be the end of the 18-month arrangement. And everything's clean because we start over with a new contract with Dean. Everything's fresh and new. And I have to tell you, in the insurance side of the equation, it's a lot more attractive and a lot more appealing for the carriers to look at this and say, we're willing to get more aggressive because they have all these components built in, and they're serious about the wellness piece. And we've seen much more aggressive renewals. And what's interesting is we think 5%, relatively speaking, from an increase is a decent renewal increase. Well, 5% represents about $250,000 in and of itself. So over the course of a few years, we could pay this, the return on investment could more than pay itself off.
Joan, you had some questions.
I was just wondering about the medical records. I'm assuming that they would have like the Epic system on
Right, Epic
site?
system, and you can do it over I use Epic at home, okay, so, the question would be whether you create a separate environment or not, I mean, and that I haven't. All the information should be able to be placed straight into their Dean
So that
records.
it's, everything that happens there is known.
Right.
Does the current nurse that we're using have access to that?
Right, she
So-
would with the confidentiality rules.
Right, so those records are all available currently.
Related to the other part on the cost, I was curious, do we have any idea how much was spent for those types of visits last year without this model? Because it's kind of a limited kind of visit. I mean, do we know how much of our premiums were paid out because of urgent care or these types of visits?
When we looked at the fee-for-service equivalents of those procedures, top of my head, it was in the same ballpark of what and that was on a 12-month basis, and it was within the same ballpark of what your 18-month projection is.
Yes, we did do that.
Okay, I
Al
figured
went
you would.
back to Dean and gathered the specific data on those particular services
Visits.
to see. And it appeared, again, that was just taking a snapshot in a given period, so you would think that that's representative of a typical year, but it appeared from that perspective that there would be an equal trade-off, not necessarily a benefit, but it would at least be equal. And then the wellness piece is really where the long-term investment would pay off. So we thought at a minimum, we'll break even on those services, but where we can really excel is on the wellness end.
And then the other thing that we were hearing occasionally, through some of the sessions is the convenience associated with having something that's under the control. I mean, like even, you don't have to schedule and leave school and get a sub in some cases, so that it increases the chances of getting something taken care of earlier rather than later. But also just that it relieves a bit of the uncertainty and associated with not sure if I can get my child in because they're, got this kind of thing, that having this kind of control in a way, as opposed to having this access, yeah, that's really the better term for it.
Is this something that you could potentially look at, not only for the school district, but actually the village employees as well? So that it could be a shared service?
They would love to piggyback on top of this, but I will say, having done this in multiple communities, most recently we plugged the clinic model in Oshkosh, the city, the school district, and the county. And the biggest challenge when you start combining is you just added several, not only months, probably years to the process, because getting everyone synced up is a longer term proposition.
But could it be a
Eventually,
long-term
they could
goal so
certainly add on.
that we could add it on, especially
Absolutely.
seeing we're having it up, putting it into an offsite?
Absolutely.
Would that save it?
Would it save? Well, from a scalability standpoint, you'd be sharing in cost. Now, one of the challenges is the village is aligned with the UW system, interestingly enough, and obviously the district we're aligned with the Dean St. Mary's system. So that would make a challenge, but it would certainly, you'd be sharing in the fixed cost, so that would certainly save money. And the other benefit of it is by having more population, you may be able to increase services that would be available. And the one additional thing, I know we talked about trying to save just from the claims transitioning, but I will say, don't do it for that reason. Because in the end, the true savings is not
Got it.
transition, it's from the wellness component, it's from the longer, how do you save money on claims? You pay less for the claims,
Yeah.
or you pay less of the claims, or you have fewer claims. We're trying to have fewer claims, and that's ultimately where your real ROI is on this initiative. It's not, I don't think it's on the other two categories,
I
frankly.
appreciate your honesty on that, yeah.
You haven't heard from anybody, but yeah,
I thought, on the nurse practitioner, it said 40 hours a week. What is that time?
I'm sorry, what is that,
When
what?
you were looking at the nurse practitioner saying that it would be available 40 hours a week, which means this clinic is 40 hours a week?
Correct.
Okay, so what's the time window on that?
You mean like from what time of the
From when to
day?
when? Yeah.
I think, I had heard that this is kind of to be determined, it'll depend on.
Because, I guess when I'm looking at a feasibility on something like this, is that, for me, location is important in that if it's too far away from the school during the day, it's not gonna get touched. If it's too inaccessible based on the time window, it's not gonna get used. And the bad thing is that if you were talking family, I believe even to some degree and everything, during the school day, it's gonna be about as most clinics and not seeing a lot of people. And they're all waiting to get there right at the end of the school day or something like that. So I guess with sitting there saying it's to be determined, it seems like that's almost a major part of the effectiveness of the clinic.
Absolutely, I agree, and that's been a fair amount of the discussion. initially call it 10 to 6, 11 to 7 was discussed as initially, and that was really to post the position so that, and as well as begin the initiation of it, knowing that as a system, when the Dean St. Mary's system was looking at it, there wasn't a strong feasibility analysis that could be done initially, but to Doc Random's point, part of it is, once you get it off the ground, the system is willing to be nimble in adjusting those hours according to what they're seeing, hearing, feeling as they become part of the fabric of the
And
day.
it has to be demand-based, like you're saying. I mean, it may be that early morning is best, we don't know. I don't know anyway, I mean, I haven't been through it, it doesn't sound like that my place, but early morning is better, we've already done that at our site. So, you know,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
a matter of what the demand curve is, and I don't know how to predict that right now.
So the other areas that you said there's some experience, with this, it's outside the Dean, I mean, Dean St. Mary's doesn't have much experience in this right now, it's kind of one of their
Right,
first.
except we've done it at our own clinics, we do it.
Yes, right,
I mean,
right,
so
but,
all we
okay,
know is that those, like you're saying, the early and late hours are always popular.
got it, okay.
And that it won't be that, I just don't wanna I didn't wanna speak for the others that lock somebody to 11 to 7 and say, and it turns out that 6 to 4 is better. I mean, on
Yeah.
some days, so that those things would be flexible.
Question and a comment. The practitioner will be contracted for the 18 months, I'm assuming?
Right.
Correct. The objective would be to contract the practitioner for 18
Okay,
months.
because I think that personal recognition is a huge piece, and I'd be a little bit nervous if, because they're part of the dean system, there'd be fluidity to move into, from this clinic to another, and all of a sudden we have one practitioner, then 6 months later, a different one might come in.
Right.
I agree with you, Mark, and that's our intention, is to get somebody in here that will build a relationship with our staff. They'll be comfortable, they'll take advantage of the opportunity. So, we expect it to be one person.
Okay, great. Then the comment, I've worked with the WTA in my past with insurance issues and trying to control costs and what have you, and I'm thrilled with the leadership and the work that Steve, Connie, Dr. Annam, Al, the committee. I really believe that we have to be proactive at a local level to try to contain what costs we can, and to show responsibilities to the powers statewide that might want to come in and kind of try to regulate things. And so to me, it's a worthwhile venture, and I'm very excited about the potential. Thank you for all you guys have done.
I guess I'd like to ask a couple questions, and more on the school district side, is in picking location, when you looked at what you came up with, kind of the top 3, which 2 are inside the intermediate school, when you looked at those, about the cost, one of them wouldn't take up any classroom space, so that we would still get the same seat effectiveness out of the intermediate school, correct? The office space wouldn't impact our student seat space?
That's correct.
And the other effect of when you were looking at it, the consideration of time, whatever, especially during the day did you have any impression as to whether it'd be easier for the teachers to be to intermediate or out to that park? And the effectiveness on the parking lot situation at intermediate, if anything like that started to happen?
That's a great question. We've received different types of feedback from folks when it comes to the topic of a wellness clinic. Privacy is very important for a number of people, so we have had some staff indicate that having this at a location not connected to a school would be preferable to them, because then there wouldn't be the concern that who is, I'm on security camera, I'm using my badge, the whole 9 yards. And so we have had people say that having it some other location is their preference. Others have said the opposite. So schools that have started these, there are those embedded in school facilities, and there's those that are embedded in rental spaces. So there's no right answer one way or another. It's just kind of personal preference. One of the things that we would like to do when we have a further discussion about this topic for the long term is really talk about the location. We feel for a trial period it makes the most sense to keep our investment as low as possible, but that doesn't mean the permanent location for this maybe shouldn't be somewhere in the Heritage Complex. It doesn't mean maybe some other facility that should be discussed. As we know, we've talked about different options at the Teaching and Learning Center. We know there's other discussions going on in the community about other spaces. So in the long term, we think we would want to have a discussion, if this model can prove itself out, as to where is the right location for this. In the short run, we believe this is the best decision that we can, best recommendation based on keeping the outlay as low as we can to prove that this can work. But we would really love to have that discussion with the board. Where would the long-term home be if this model is successful?
I personally like that kind of an approach rather than investing a lot of fixed cost into something and then find out, oops, well, maybe it isn't the right thing to do. I mean, for what it's worth, given the relatively low cost.
Well, I mean, looking at that, I mean, I understand trying to keep the low cost up front. My only thing is I'm sitting there looking at, you just dropped 20% of your facility costs on a temporary situation, where no matter what, well, that's not true, I should say. The probability is that you wouldn't end up staying at that first location, and you basically, 100,000 of that, roughly 130,000, is non-recoupable. And, you paid to renovate a space that you're probably gonna have for a year and a half.
That was 70,000.
Makes me a little queasy, but I also understand it's 20% of the cost if you scrub the project. You saved 80%.
It's costing you 70,000 for your build-up, and it's costing you a rental fee every year of 24,000.
So about 100
Which, so you got an ongoing cost that's gonna continue with that. My point is, I get sticker shock when I see $500,000 and 800,000, so when I saw that this weekend, I wasn't at all pleased when we talked about this. It was something we thought we could just incorporate into our school and you make it work. As it gets investigated by everybody, that doesn't happen, and probably should have known that. I don't like a reoccurring fee where we're paying rent to some place. I do, to your point, I think it shouldn't be in a school. I think it should be someplace else, and the problem with ours is it could be in one school, but it's still not close to another school. And that's gonna get worse and worse, so I don't know where that's gonna go. We're gonna see different things. To me, that old admin building would have been a good spot, depending on how you could make it work. I don't know what the build out would have been, but then we would have had it in a place that it's ours, not someplace we lose. I'm not for any time that we lose classrooms. We just do referendums, and I get that question all the time. I just got it the other day again about the high school. When that was done, it was this many, and then you do a referendum and it's supposed to be this, and it seems like it's not that somewhere's down the line because the rooms get used someplace else, and this is an example of how that happens, and all of a sudden we're building because we use stuff up. So to me, if we can do it without it taking up classroom space, and the intermediate is our one now, and the high school, that they have lots of room, and all of a sudden somehow we don't have room later. Would rather not see that happening. As much as it isn't, this whole thing comes about because we're trying to save costs on our premiums and saving costs for our workers and to the district itself. So I'm for the plan. I voted for the plan in the budget without seeing exactly the details of where this went, and was confused on where it went. Now I got it kind of figured out. But I think it's a great thing to do for our employees. I think it's a great thing to do. It's the way medicine's going if you're gonna keep your premiums lower, which is how we're gonna save money. I'm not perfectly solved with where it is and how we're spending there, but I think this is the most reasonable. And I think it is gonna change in 18 months on where we do that, but we can plan a little bit for that then and look at some different sites and opportunities maybe coming up in the next 18 months that might give us a chance. Now, that said, we did know something about this with the buildings, some of the building stuff that we were doing. And somehow we dropped the ball, we could have incorporated that in to one of those schools as a separate thing when we had the construction people there with the intermediate, because we've been messing with this for a year, right? So,
But
something that we should do in the next 18 months as we're doing that.
Well, I'll say that based on what I saw in the layout on the intermediate school and everything, and moving heritage, whether we incorporated it in then or do it now, it would have been similar. Because we didn't touch that area if you're looking at the office space. So therefore, the cost of renovating the office space would have been the same no matter when we did it. And it touches no classrooms, so we don't lose classroom space, and it didn't affect any of the initial build. So in a weird way, we're kind of touching an area that wasn't touched before.
But then I'll say $500,000 to $800,000 is crazy for what this is then.
Well, yeah, but when you look at the type of space you're talking medical space. And there are very specific code requirements for medical space over anything else. Electrically, water, and all that other stuff has a much higher requirements than a school building. And it's always gonna be a little more expensive square footage to do a medical than to do any other type of space.
And I believe some of our costs were
And some of the costs.
some of the costs were escalated with regards to trying to put even though it's employees and their families, kind of a public space into a school,
Yes.
and making sure that it operates separate from people being able to get into the other aspects of the school. So
Special
some of it was the kind of the safety isolation piece of it. There's also a part that we've had conversations about of just in order for staff to use it, they have to feel comfortable going there. It has to be a nice space. If it's not welcoming, if it's not, we're not gonna get to the benefit where we need to be. So that was the other piece we looked at, was how do we renovate it in a location that keeps our other part of the school functioning the way it was intended, and also create the kind of space that's inviting where our staff wanna go. And so those were all the kind of the pieces that kind of went into some of those discussions.
I think I support going to the site to off-site, because I'm hearing around the table here, we don't want to lose class space. And even though the office is not class space at this point, you could potentially renovate it into some type of school activity.
Well,
So,
maybe an interesting question is, of all these wellness things that have been done, how many have failed? How many got shut down? Or how long have some of them been running?
We've not been involved with any clinics that have failed. We're probably working with 25 different clinics, the longest one, probably 14 years, on somewhere between 10 and 14 years in the Fond du Lac area. And are there some that have failed? Yeah, I think they failed. The ones that we kind of get brought in seemingly after the fact, but some of those that have failed, frankly, are those that don't have a clear vision of what it is they're trying to accomplish. And I would say largely it's because, they're either adding a layer of cost without understanding that it should be wellness focused, or they're adding a layer of cost without understanding what the true way of changing the medical trend, and without tying it to biometric exams, so that there's more information available. And coordinating the insurance arm with the clinic arm, I would say, is the ones that I've seen not do well. But I have not been involved with any, or we haven't statewide that have failed.
I mean, I saw this model early on as I was leaving the military. You were starting to see regional wellness centers popping up based on military hospital units sitting near other type of units. And they were starting to say, why are we sending them to military hospitals when we don't have to? And it was trying to regionalize these little local wellness centers with the concept that it saved a lot of money and effort on people to be closer to their work to get their care, and it was more under control of their work. So you weren't seeing as many people losing time at work. And the one thing I feel is, looking at this, is when you hear that there's 25 of them you guys have done, and probably most of them based on this pattern of wellness and limited care, not trying to say, are they gonna be mini ERs? You know, that's not gonna happen, yet some people seem to, I remember some people seem to think they were gonna be, and it's like, no, that's not what you're gonna be doing there. And with that vision and that layout, they seem to always succeed. You never seem to see them disappearing. That's why I gotta admit, when I saw this board packet, my first thing was, we're dropping 6 figures for temporary. And I really cringed at that, because in the long run, you're gonna pay the rest of that bill. I personally believe putting it in the school, putting it under our control, getting rid of an ongoing recurring cost is gonna save you a lot more money in the long run. We're not giving up classrooms because this area is non-classroom. And I don't know, I guess I look at a proposal like this as, we either do it or we don't. And the concept of, we're gonna try it for 18 months, giving up 20% of our total cost, just because $100,000 is a lot of money. And if we're gonna spend it here, I'd rather spend it all and do it right than basically turn around and have to spend another $500,000 later after giving up the $100,000.
So are you proposing to put it in the intermediate?
I would say, yeah. I mean, why would we build a permanent facility off-site? Not under our control, with a landlord situation that could shut you down any minute. Anytime that they say, oh, we decided to renovate this building and get rid of it. Go find another place to rent, you just dropped 6 figures into setting it up. You're gonna have to do it somewhere else for another 6-some figure. I don't, because of it being that type of a long-term proposal, and you want people to feel comfortable with it and where it is, that doesn't make sense. And if you want it to work during the day when people are working, you don't send them 15, 20 minutes away. That doesn't help. And while, yes, we have some schools in different areas, let's be honest, we have a very central cluster of the vast majority is in one spot. That we control access, we control the setup, we control the hours, we control the parking, we control all of that.
I would almost go towards this proposal, try it out, and then in our next referendum, put it into the next school building.
Next referendum, I hope is more than 5 years away. It better be. That's why we did the way we did, expanding the size of the intermediate, so that we would have to have that. And even if the next.
But that's your long-term planning, that's where it goes, and then you've got it under control. I think Randy and some of the discussion is correct, is people have to feel comfortable going to it. I think the other thing is parking. You know, depending upon when this is going to be utilized, do we have enough parking to support that? And out in this facility, or out in that area, you've got the parking.
Okay, 2 more questions, then we'll kind of close the discussion and see if we can have a motion.
I'm just curious, and it does need to get brought back up, I brought it up in the budget meeting. You know, Dean is proposing this to us, and I get that it's sold with 2 potential really big benefits. Obviously, wellness to our people and better care of our people is the primary one. But make no mistake, I mean, it's being sold to us that it's going to decrease costs. And I guess my assumption was, since this was Dean's proposal of a model, I didn't understand why they weren't providing the space at their own clinic. Why are we even talking about space? They're in the medical space business. Why don't we just have a room here? Now, that's been addressed, I guess. The other part of my concern is we're already waffling that don't expect to see these lowered costs soon, because this is all long-term, and it will take us a while to reap the wellness benefits with our people. So I guess I'm a little disappointed that we don't have harder numbers in terms of what did we spend on those kinds of visits last year, and then to be able to compare that to whether this model makes those visits cheaper. The person is one part, so I understood it that that's the part we were paying for, the person. But, I mean, obviously there's gonna be medical supplies as well. how does that all work? What do they charge us for tongue depressors and Tylenol? Is it like any other insurance person charges a patient for Tylenol? I mean, those costs too are gonna get passed on to us, whatever gets consumed in that facility.
You're getting up to this first.
Go ahead.
So, part of my point earlier that, back to your main point of, are we going to be able to save, and how much are we going to be able to save? And one of the things Dr. Annam said, you know, from an analytics and taking a look at things, we did look at what the cost was, and we could very well save more than what we're paying for the fixed cost. Based on last year, when we looked at it, there was more spend there than what we're spending accordingly. What we don't know, the reality is, we're changing behavior patterns. We don't know how many of the behavior patterns are going to change. So the secondary part of the strategy is come July of 2018, depending on where we are, come July 2018, the next step is what plan design changes do we need to make to maybe create additional incentives to increase. And those plan design changes are also more palatable when you have a zero, low or no cost option to go to this nurse practitioner. And you can save on the premiums, which can more than offset, by the plan changes, more than offset the additional fixed cost then.
The more of these fixed costs though that get passed on to us, I just hope there is a realization that that will give us leverage to play hardball with other insurers. So
Bingo.
we appreciate the help, but
Mark?
Well, I think Julie and
Connie,
maybe
you had a
even,
comment? I'm
oh,
sorry.
go ahead.
I just wanted to follow up a little bit on a comment that Julie made, so that you all know, we did thoroughly investigate the possibility of having space within the local Dean Clinic. Initially, we thought that sounded like a fantastic idea, but after having quite a few conversations, it was clear to us that that wasn't the best option. And for reasons that the staff at the local clinic did not feel that that was the best option, and they have patients other than Waunakee School District staff that they're worried about, and they didn't want to create this differentiated type of treatment for a person when they walk into the clinic. Well, you get the fast lane because you're a Waunakee School District staff member, you're one of our other patients, so you gotta sit and wait for a while. So, I mean, that's oversimplifying, but we really did look at that. And then as far as other costs, the Dean Clinic will stock our clinic with supplies at a slight markup for cost, so it's not gonna be the, $10 per Tylenol. It's a slight markup, and we'll pay as we go, as we use.
I think that's really important you address those for the public, so thank you, Connie, because I know the questions were asked.
Mark, you had your hand up.
My point, I think, in response to Dave's concern, I see on one hand where it might be a future benefit to have the work done and be permanent, so we can go forward, but, when you're looking at almost $500,000 difference between the Arboretum site and the cheapest, least expensive outlay for the intermediate, this is a trial. And, if after 18 months, the numbers don't bear as we hope they will, then we're gonna have to make another decision. Okay, are we gonna continue with ongoing study, or are we going to embrace, because we see the real value here? And so, as a good steward of our taxpayers' money, I feel much better going with the impermanence of a trial versus committing $500,000 of building costs
Yep.
to something that we can't unequivocally say it's gonna succeed. We think it will, but that's quite a bet that we'd be laying down on something that we're still not certain. It could be the best intention, but if our staff don't embrace it for things beyond our control, then it may not work. And so I think this is really for the taxpayers the best thing we can offer.
Joan?
Yeah, and I agree with Mark and with Julie, and I think the timing is so important. If we go go to the intermediate, it probably delays it another whole semester, and then it's, you know, I think it's really important that if possible, we can get it up and running by January. I also think that because we don't know how it's going to be received, that offsite might be embraced so much better. And even time, having it offsite, people might say, well, yeah, it doesn't really matter if I go to this school or this school. I think just that 18 months where people kind of get used to going to this clinic model might allow us to say, yeah, it can work in a school. I'm not sure the school is the best place right now. And, you know, I guess I would like to think about, I think the village talked to you about the old library. That would be a great site. You know, maybe we can have a district-owned place, but not the school.
Okay, are we ready
Let's
for?
have it done. Start a program.
Oh, donate, that's even better.
Don't write that.
Is there a motion to approve of the plan as presented? And then there's actually also, I think, action that needs to be taken on the use of district fund balance, both of those within one motion.
I move that we accept the proposal and utilize the fund balance to cover the cost for this 18 months.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other comments? I want to echo everything that we've shared. I mean, I'm glad we've had the opportunity to have this kind of dialogue and the work that's been going on over the X number of months on this. I do sincerely appreciate everybody's input and willingness to listen, and I think this is a great way to try this out. So there's a motion on the table with a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, everyone.
Can we move 2 and 3 along? We've got staff along.
Sure.
Okay, because the Lincoln community is
Yep, so if you want to go to a multi-level
yeah, if we
systems
can,
of
I'd like to
support
move the agenda around a little bit. If we can have item 3, since we've got staff here for the multi-level systems of support.
So, just as a mode of introduction, I think everybody knows I'm Janet Thomas, our Assistant Director of Student Services. When Julie was talking about the events that she attended here a few weeks ago, that was a piece that's related directly to what we're talking about tonight, which is multi-level systems of support, specifically as it reflects onto student behavior. So I'm going to turn it over to Janet and thank her for pulling this together and leading this initiative in our district.
Thanks. Yeah, so thank you to Julie for introducing this and the board report, and thank you for attending. That was really nice to have the board member there and have all of the staff see what we're doing. So part of the work in student services is really looking at a multi-level system of support, and so I'm going to introduce that topic to you tonight, and then certainly answer any questions that you might have as we move through this. So as Steve pointed out in their presentation, you've all seen the district planning, and this is my one animation, so everybody watch it, here we go. So this is where we are, this is where multi-level systems of support fit within the district strategic plan. But I will say that although it is under student services, the work that's going to be done really goes across different domains and areas of focus. A lot of our work in student services really bleeds through all of those areas of the district strategic plan. So this particular graphic is one that you may have seen if you've attended different conferences or read different things about what's going on in schools of the last 10 years. This triangle is really a graphic that describes a multi-level system of support. And just as its name indicates, we're really talking about just a framework and organization for different levels of how we support kids and their different needs and meeting all of their needs. We have 3 levels that are really indicated in this graphic. The first one sort of permeates through the whole triangle, and that really is like our universal instruction. So that green part going all the way up to the top really is the universal instruction, and that really meets the needs of, say, 80 to 90% of our student population. So for both, for example, for academic instruction, that universal instruction is kind of what we're looking at for all students, and it meets the needs of 80 to 90%. Then we have some students, about 5 to 10% of a student population, that they need more than the universal curriculum. They need more than that universal instruction. And so we say that they have kind of more supplemental supports that are needed. And then we have few students, so 1 to 5% of our student population, that need something more than just the universal supplemental supports. They need more intensive interventions, kind of at the top of that triangle. So we have a really well-developed academic, that left side of the triangle, we have a really well-developed academic system of support. A more common term that you guys may have heard is RTI, the response to intervention. That sort of globally, people understand that as the academic side of the triangle. So those tiers of support there for academics. We also, and we are all familiar now with kind of a coaching model as best practice for professional development. And so we included on the bottom of the triangle there that coaching kind of permeates through the whole of our systems of support, so that we make sure that we are implementing all of these levels with fidelity and with success. And our LIT coaches are an example of that, and you'll see as we talk more, there's some coaching that comes along with these multi-level systems of support as well. So I've addressed kind of the academic piece of it and coaching. I'm going to focus for the rest of the time really on that behavior side. Joan.
Janet, before you go on, just something that I have heard at many of the sites in the last listening are staff members concerned on the academic side of students at the younger ages, K to 3 maybe, or K to 2, not receiving services early enough. And I don't know what kind of process, identification, it seems like the identifications are less than they used to be. Is that the RTI model? Is that being mandated? I don't know how to respond to them. If there's anything you could help with.
Sure. Are you talking specifically about academic interventions?
Academic intervention.
Well, and behavioral, I think.
Yeah.
Because they go hand in hand.
They do go hand in hand, but kids that aren't being successful, you know, we hear it year after year. We see them in 2nd grade, we see them in 1st grade, we see them in 2nd grade. But it takes until 5th grade before they get identified and receive services.
So there's really 2 different kind of conversations to have there. I guess that I would like to, for now, focus on the behavioral side of it, but I will say that in all of our buildings, we have very well-defined criteria for meeting the academic needs for kids. And really, when we talk about identifying kids, I'm not sure if you're referring to for special education or down that path, but we do identify kids fairly early and consistently around some very specific criteria around our testing that we have for academics. And I think that we are doing more along, if we go back to the triangle, kind of more along really making sure that our universal instruction for both academics and behavior is robust and consistent, and it's really meeting the needs of most of the kids. And then we have some really specific criteria for identifying those some of the kids that you may have heard the term getting a tier 2 kind of intervention for academics, and that could be delivered by a classroom teacher or a reading specialist or math interventionist.
If I could just interject, Joan, why don't we just take, I'll note that piece and I'll make sure we bring that piece back. Because I think it just requires a little bit more of a discussion on some of those items, and we can talk a little bit more in depth of kind of what our experience is at those lower levels with kids who are struggling, and then we can bring that back at a future meeting, if that's all right with you.
Sure. And it's a great question, because we really are trying to tie those 2 things together, so it is a complete picture. You know, to Mark's point, academics, but also behavior. You know, how are we tying both of those things together? So, did you have a specific question? We'll keep it going here. So the importance really of that right side of the triangle, which I'll be focusing on tonight, is again we've really become pretty well versed in the academic side of that triangle, and so it's a natural expansion to the behavior side because we really know the strong connection between behavior and academic success. Also wanted to point out that when we're talking about behavior, we have to think about the whole continuum of behavior. And it's not just that explosive, verbally aggressive, physically aggressive behavior. we have a lot of evidence and data to support that kids are really experiencing mild internalizing things, like anxiety or depression, things that are impacting their academic success that we just need to really start looking at in a more complete, systematic way. We have district data and also staff are reporting. I know somebody mentioned the board listening sessions. I know that you have all heard that, increasing concerns about behavior in different settings across all of our buildings. And that really has shown over the last 10 years some pretty consistent concerns about behavior across all of our schools and district. And then some measures we have indicate really an increase in behavior concerns. You know, we've talked a little bit in some pockets about our increase in drug and alcohol use, the Dayton County Youth Assessment, our increase in anxiety and depression, suspensions, expulsions. These are all kind of big things that have indicated maybe that we need to look at our system in a little bit greater detail. So there's a quote up there that you can read that I have actually printed and posted in my office. My point here is that really our behavior systems should be based on the same premise as our academic systems. And what I mean by that is that we have teachers who love to teach and are good at teaching. And so the premise here is that teachers daily teach not only the academics, but they teach behavior. They teach their behavioral expectations. And so I think, you know, at this time, it's really a good time to start formalizing some of those conversations with our schools and through the training that we're working on. So really, the most well-known and well-regarded framework for a behavioral system, a multi-level system of support for behavior, is PBIS. And that's what Julie, I knew I would do that. I have a 10-year-old who's Julia, and so for 10 years I say Julia.
No worries.
So Julie. But PBIS really is positive behavior intervention and supports, and this really is that multi-level system, that right side of the triangle. What this is a school-wide teaching model and framework that includes all of those tiers that I introduced in that first graphic, and it really is that framework to guide our work on and around the behavioral systems. So really, initially looking at that universal instruction and expectation, and then moving towards what we're doing for those kids who maybe need more, and for the kids who need most. So looking at it through a real systems approach. So PBIS is actually not new to our district. About 5 years ago, we moved forward with it with interested schools and administrators. And at that time, it was Heritage, the intermediate, and the middle school. And they really wanted to pursue the training path that PBIS took them on. And we started with them. And we've continued to add layers of trainings and buildings. And what we've learned through that process is that it's really beneficial to have kind of a system approach to behavior, similar to academics. And it really became clear that it was helpful to identify that behavior education plan, and we started thinking, well, you know what, this would really help to solidify some of the conversations that we're having, and really take a dive into what best practices in reducing behavior issues, not only teaching behavior, but reducing behavior issues across our district. So this year, we moved forward with all 6 of our schools doing and starting the training and implementing Tier 1. So the 3 schools that have already gone through the training, they've had staff turnover. We're kind of differentiating a little bit for those 3 buildings, but it still is, and if you asked Dan or Chris or Marcy, I think that those teams still feel like it's beneficial for them to kind of review and refresh and get some new people trained on that Tier 1. We anticipate that this will be an ongoing training timeline for PBIS as we move through the training. So what we have done so far is each building has identified teams, leadership teams, And those include really a wide variety of teachers and staff. So it's teachers, it's specialists, it's paraeducators, it's student services staff, and those people are the school counselors, school psychs, school nurses, school social workers, and administrators. These are all staff who have volunteered to serve on this committee, either because of interest or a particular skill set. The one group of people that we do have in each building, it's either an individual or a shared position, as I talked about the coaching model with our triangle graphic. We have internal coaches, and these are really teacher leaders that are helping to organize and facilitate the work. So the internal coaches are really important and will be really important as we move forward, because they're really the connection to the training and the administrators, as well as the team and the entire school staff. And I think that it'll be really important for us to think about what path they're on and the role that they're taking. I think that it may be beneficial for us to talk in the future about providing an additional stipend for them, like we do for some of the other teacher leaders that we have in the district who are leadership roles within departments.
I apologize for interrupting this. With the internal coach is a question I have. So, does every school have coaches on site, or is some being shared between one building and another?
So every school has their own internal coach, or it's a shared position between two people, and these are just teachers who wanted a leadership role within this process.
But this is in addition to the behavior coach?
Yes, yes, and that's a great point. The way that the PBIS framework and system works is that there are internal coaches within each building, but there's also what's called an external coach, who sort of helps guide the internal coaches in that work, and that is me and Tessa Nygum, now she got married, Tessa, who is our behavior coach. So Tessa and I play a very important role in this process, but really this is a grassroots school effort. So it's the staff who are really doing the work.
Okay, so we have one behavior coach, other than yourself, to work with the 6 schools. Is that
Right.
correct?
Okay. Yep. Family and community members also, in the buildings that have been doing this for a little bit, they definitely try to engage families, because we're trying to create a common language and expectation, and certainly we want families to have input on what those expectations are and what that common language is around behavioral expectations. So those are the leadership teams. The work so far this year, as I mentioned, all schools have identified an internal coach in that leadership team. For Tier 1, we will participate in a series of 4 trainings. 2 of those have already happened, one of which is the one that Julie attended. There's one more in January, and then we'll do one at the start of the school year to kind of continue to engage in the work. The main job that the school teams are having right now, or doing right now, is to really develop that common language for the behavioral expectations that they have in their building. And then to kind of put some parameters and some definitions around minor and major behaviors. As I said before, that behavior kind of occurs on a continuum. What we have found is that sometimes the minor behaviors take as much work to intervene around as the major behaviors. And we think that we can change that a little bit by just doing some more school-wide sorts of things. We're also working very hard to implement consistent data collection and a process for analyzing that behavioral data. And then finally, really to be using evidence-based practices to teach the behavioral expectations at the universal level. And although we're taking a district approach to this, to really promote that consistency and have everybody have the same knowledge base, every school has their own climate, their own personality, their own population, and unique set of needs. So we certainly aren't expecting that we have district-wide behavioral expectations. They really are unique to the buildings. I have to say that they aren't very different, and there's only so many different expectations you can have in a hallway, but definitely letting the buildings have some of their own, address some of their own unique needs and populations. So data tracking then, I won't go into specifics around data, but we do currently have a lot of measures that are being used not as consistently as we would hope, and that will be one of the goals, so that we can really have more consistent data district-wide on this. We do have behavior referrals, and again, using that language of a minor behavior, so like being tardy to class, maybe blurting out, and then our more major behaviors, which are some of the things that maybe you have heard about in board listening sessions, more aggressive type behaviors, either verbally or physically. We do utilize social emotional behavioral screeners in 3rd through 7th grade, and we're hoping to expand that into the high school. Teacher referrals, just our building intervention team models are still a good way to get some information around behavior. We look at attendance grades. And then health office visits is something that over the last couple of years we've really looked at, because we noticed that some kids who have more internalizing behaviors, who are not problems in the classroom, but they manifest in other ways, those types of kids who have some social anxiety or some depression or those sorts of internalizing behaviors, they will often go to the health office. And so we've learned a lot about kids who visit the health office more than 4 times in a month, and we really kind of try and look at those kids too. We have a new tool in the district called EduClimber, which is a data visualization tool, which is basically just a warehouse for all of the data, and that is going to be really hugely beneficial to try to both aggregate and disaggregate our behavioral data, so we can really make sure that what we're doing is working, and we can see if there's any patterns throughout the district. Also in particular buildings, particular classrooms, we'll really be able to use that to measure our progress and success. So our goals for PBIS really now and ongoing is to truly build the capacity of staff. Not only to decrease the problem behavior, but really initially to just empower them to know that they can teach behavior, and that our real goal is teaching behavior just as we teach academics, and understanding that for some kids they just need that explicit instruction around how to behave in certain environments, and we found it to be very successful when we do that. So we've organized leadership teams, attended the trainings, and then continued the work from the trainings. Even after our first full team district training, there's been a lot of work that has gone on in the buildings. I think every building has had their first universal team meeting, and Tessa and I are trying to attend all of those, so that's been really beneficial. A secondary goal then is to just kind of connect both sides of that triangle to make sure that people are connecting what they know and understand about identifying kids who need additional academic support to what they know and understand about kids who might need additional behavioral support. And then really finally just meeting the unique needs of every student so that they can be successful academically, because we have kids who just need a little bit something different and more, and those needs are important for us to address. I'm just trying to do that in a real systematic way. So any questions?
When I look at the goals, as a board member, even as a former classroom teacher, how do I know that this is being successful? I mean, those are very non-specifics.
Yes.
And I'm not saying they did it right or are doing it right, but, Madison, with some of their behavioral issues, they said, okay, this is the percent of kids we have who are being suspended, who are disruptive, who are being expelled. As a teacher, to me, this looks fairly time intensive for a lot of the staff. Don't know if it is or isn't. I think to me it looks really worthwhile because of the comprehensiveness and consistency from one building to another. A lot of good ideas going out there, but there's a framework that kids' expectations will be sort of universal. But how do we know what problems are being solved? And so right now, what are as a board member, do we have numbers that tell us X amount are being disruptive, and so the goal here is to eliminate that by 5%, right? Do we have anything concrete like that?
Yes, we do. So I wouldn't have the time to go through all of that today, but I can
Right.
say that yes, we do, and these are really the data points that we have. I think the thing that we're trying to get better at is to be more consistent with our data tracking. And before we can do that, we have to be consistent with what our expectations are. And also consistent with how we're defining minor and major behavior. Because if somebody in one building is blurting out in class a major behavior, and somebody in another building is saying, oh, I'm just reteaching around that, I'm not even putting that in as a behavior referral or documenting that as a behavior referral, that can really skew our measure of if we're successful or not. So I know that those goals are not specific, but we first need to really get consistent with our data collection so that we know what our baseline is. I mean, I can tell you that we've got over 1,200 behavior referrals every year for the last 10 years. And I can tell you that we've got, 20% of our population or 10 to 20% of our population who on our screeners are indicating that they've got anxiety and some internalizing problems. I can tell you these things, but we're getting to the point where we're more consistent, and then we'll be able to really specify a goal.
Mark, one of the questions that Janet and Kurt and I have talked about is it's exactly getting at what you're saying. Is saying, well, what can we bring back here as data? Well, right now, I think the most important piece that Janet said there was trying to build that consistency right now so that the data is good. It's not that we don't have data, we have numbers, and we have got referrals and all these things, but we want it to be meaningful in the context to say that these type of things are making a change and a difference, and trying to make sure that your interpretation is the same as mine if you and I are teaching next to each other, so that the pieces that are getting entered into our system are clear. So that's where the piece of the EduClimber is really an important tool for us as a district to be adopting as a way for us to bring those pieces together, have some expectations. The work that happened at our first meeting that Julie was part of was really going down to your basics of saying, where are the areas that we need to define behavior, and what do those start to look like, the first steps that these groups are making it from. And then we can start to collect consistent data that drives those. And we'll be able to show you kind of where we started, how we've clarified things, and how things move forward. So in subsequent presentations on this type of a topic, you'll start to see some of the specifics that we're bringing out. So today is really saying, here's what PBIS is, because I'm gathering many of you have maybe heard about, we have some behavior concerns, how are we addressing it? This is our universal approach of saying, here's how we're trying to bring everybody into a framework, and here are the things that we need to be looking at to track to show you how we're making progress, if that helps.
Jill?
Can you talk a little more about that EduClimber? Is that is it part of Infinite Campus?
No.
Or a whole different system that, is it digital? Do they log in? Do they handwrite it? Who does it?
So, and that is probably, again, a topic that will need to come back because there's a lot of information that we could share. So, sorry, Joan, we're not answering any of your questions.
That's okay.
But I will say it is not part of.
I'm just setting the next meeting up.
Yes,
So.
exactly.
Or the next 3.
That's
where I wanted to go to be.
Yeah, I will say quickly, EduClimber is not part of Infinite Campus. There was a district leadership team of administrators and teacher leaders who this summer in July spent 2 days at a training to overview EduClimber, and then we've since adopted that in the district, and it is a fantastic tool. Yes, teachers log in, they have access to their class based on different rights that they have, and it is truly a unique visualization platform where you can sort and really pull and aggregate and disaggregate any kind of data you wanted. So if I wanted to see, our 3rd grade boys and how they were behaving in the hallway, I would be able to see that. So it's a very comprehensive tool that will be extremely beneficial as we work towards consistency.
Well, I'm seeing a lot of different teacher input or extra analysis they're having to do and all that. Where are the parents brought into this?
Yes, so as schools, go back to the triangle, this is probably the best visual to use this one. As schools are developing and determining their school-wide expectations, they certainly share and get feedback from parents as they're talking about what those are. And as we move through, and that really is the work right now. So the work right now at that universal level is making sure that we have a very clear understanding of what we expect students to do across our school environments, and really defining that very specifically. The buildings that have gone through this already, they really have shared with parents and gotten feedback from parents through open houses, newsletters that go home, and really just kind of creating that common language and expectation with parents and in the community. So it's something that's very important to this process, that we get feedback from parents and community. As we kind of move up the triangle, certainly parents are highly involved. Whenever we start talking about doing some additional tier 2 supplemental supports, parents are involved. And when we get up to kind of those few students who need that real targeted specific intervention, then definitely it becomes a family and community kind of a wraparound sort of support. So they're an important part of the process.
Any other comments, questions? To be continued. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
So the next time you see this item come back, you will see some progress that's being made, and we'll be able to showcase some of the data aspects as well. And the EduClimber piece is a good reminder for us to really show what that can do, and sometime we give a mini review of that as well.
Okay, go back to the linkage meeting, and student mental health.
This item is really a follow-up from our goals committee meeting that we had here just a few weeks ago. At the goals meeting, we had really an expanded committee of the goals committee itself, some members of the administration, but we also had members of the Waunakee Cares Coalition, and we had members of our high school. Ellen Grunder represented the Above the Influence student group. And what our purpose for that meeting was to review a linkage meeting or engagement activity with the community around student mental health and AODA issues. Really thinking this is a piece that we've talked about here this fall and laid out as one of our objectives as a district, is to link in with the community, and this being a key topic that we wanted to discuss. This really comes as a great follow-up to some of the work that occurred at the high school around the homecoming time, when we had Amalia's Hope come in a community engagement activity or a community forum in the evening to really talk about some of the issues relating, in that case, to a mother's story about her child dying of an overdose from heroin, but really opening up a dialogue around what's happening in the whole AODA spectrum in our community, and how can we start to move forward. One of the pieces that came out of that Amalia's Hope presentation was parents asking, well, what are the next steps and what are some actionable pieces? So that was really a focus of wanting to have this discussion with the goals committee, and really laying out really a framework for us to really have this discussion and how can we bring this forward. So if you want to scroll down, Rebecca, I'll come back to who that is. So what we are thinking is we are setting the goals committee is recommending a time of Monday, December 5th from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock at the Waunakee Village Center. And this will be we're going to be at the top of this page, you saw a number of the folks that we're going to be inviting, and Julie's working with me on just getting some of that language together to really send these out to the next day. But our whole premise is being that we want to be able to share some information and share some of our data, and also, most importantly, get feedback on how we can create some actionable items for us to be working on. And for that aspect, we really are identifying 3 different groups to be targeting with regards to sharing data and getting input. One is obviously our school district staff. So working with Kurt Ely, Janet Thomas, and the whole student services team, that is one aspect that we will be incorporating in. The second part is looking at the Waunakee Cares Coalition. Jody Sorensen is working with Brian Kirsten on leading that initiative and trying to just get more awareness around some of the AODA issues in our community, sharing some of the Dane County Youth Risk Assessment data, and following the Amalia's Hope presentation, their numbers have grown. So we thought this would be a great group to really represent really a community dialogue around this issue. And then I think one of the pieces we really felt was important was to really incorporate students. So Ellen Grunder attended the goals meeting representing the Above the Influence Club. Julie and I got an opportunity to meet with them. We sat with the group during contact time last Thursday and really just talked to them about some of their questions and really shared what we were envisioning for this evening. But we'd like them to be able to share their perspectives of what's happening from a student's lens, and then also be able to really gather some input from people in attendance on what are some things that they can be doing. So really the way we are setting this up is item number 2, we'll have a welcome at the very beginning. Item number 2 is these 3 groups really sharing some data pieces and sharing who they are and some input as far as what's our reality right now. And then really creating then 3 rotations around to each of these groups, the Student Services Group from the district, the Waunakee Cares Coalition, and the Above the Influence Group, where we're putting together some key questions to really generate a dialogue in a rotational basis where attendees will get to attend each of those 3 sessions and really start to brainstorm ideas as far as what are some things that we can be doing or that those groups can then be forwarding as some action pieces. What we look at after that 2-hour segment is really some thank yous and closeouts at the end, really setting up what our next steps would be, which would be those 3 groups coming back together. I'd probably see that as another goals committee or something of that nature, to really share what kind of data pieces that they received, and then talking about what are some of the actionable items that we can then take away from the student perspective, community perspective, and the school district. So in 2 hours, that's quite a bit to cover, but I think it's a pretty important topic to really try to really address those 3 pieces. What my hope is that we're able to gather some next steps, which then each 3 of those can then bridge out and continue the dialogues. So hopefully the community aspect can then take some of those things and move forward. The school district can own some of the things that we're able to, and then help to empower the kids at the high school to really bring that message and some of their work at the high school level. So the purpose of tonight is really to share this item with you that's coming out of the goals committee. I'd open it up to the other committee members if they have any comment, but otherwise just looking for your endorsement to move ahead with the planning and the implementation of this meeting on December 5th.
I guess I'd just like to add and reinforce again the 2-pronged nature of the dialogue, both to give information and then to seek input from all these different stakeholders. And I guess specifically working with the students, it occurred to me later, I tried to communicate to them as well, it's not important what we think. What really has an impact is what they're experiencing. And there's really no substitute for what they're seeing and how it's affecting their lives. And anything we can do to break down the walls of this is somebody else's problem, these are badly parented kids, or these are people we don't know. I mean, I think this is touching all of us now. Those personal stories are really, really important. And then the second piece is that it's not designed to be a 1-evening presentation and then be done. We're hoping we can help the dialogue and the information that gets shared is used to be a springboard so that then people come up with actionable items from each one of these groups. So what are the students interested in finding out more about on the topic? What supports do they think are working or not working, or how do we better engage with other people to do things that they think would work? And they don't have to have all the answers, but what they think is what really, really matters. So I'm hoping we can encourage lots of dialogue back and forth. It's a really important topic that I think is touching all of us now, so.
And I think if you look at the potential invitees, to build on what Julie was saying, is sometimes just getting people together to talk about this topic within these 3 different frameworks. Maybe some new connections can be made that they didn't realize. They could, I could work with you. That kind of stuff then just is good for everyone involved. And doesn't mean we have to do anything other than provide a framework that enables that kind of dialogue and linkage, and then they can go off and do their thing. Some of it we do internally, but a lot of it happens from that point on with the other groups and individuals, which is part of what we consider our role to be as well.
What kind of attendance would you guesstimate?
I was really surprised, the student group, there were close to 20 kids in that room that came to the meeting, so, and fairly well representative across the grade levels. I think we're hoping, at least to match similar numbers to what was there for the Amalia's Hope presentation, which was well over 100.
The Waunakee Cares Coalition, they've gained a number of interest in parties after that meeting. So where it used to be a group of a handful is now 20, 30 people on their email list. So I'm hoping that it'll gather. I would say if we hit 50 people, that would be great.
I think, I mean, I like the topics, I like how it's laid out. I think keeping people to the timeline will be a real challenge.
Right. Right.
Especially if you end up with 100 people.
So again, it's not really designed to come up with quick answers for now. I'm hoping we can just.
Yeah, but I think it would be good to kind of set that stage.
Yep, yep.
And this isn't the end of the discussion, this is the beginning of the discussion, so that people don't feel they have to say everything that's in their brain that night.
Good point.
Because I think that it looks so aggressive to me, and the amount of people on the timeline is like.
I think when we looked at the people, it kept growing during our meeting as far as who else maybe we could invite. And some of those are really duplicates when you look at the Waunakee Cares Coalition and their list. They've already have clinicians, et cetera, on their list. So there's some duplication of folks that would be attending. Yeah, I think it's a matter of trying to put some connections together, put people together. They know where these groups exist now, where they reside, and then we can figure out how they move forward. The kids right now at the high school, they're looking for a cause, because they've been talking about it, and they're looking for what's my actionable item, and that's what Ellen shared with us. So their hope is to figure out, well, what's something we can really be proactive about versus being reactive to. And I think the CARES Coalition is saying, you know what, we now have some people that we're talking to, and I think making those connections is really important. So I guess the outcome from my perspective is if we can broaden the conversation, it can continue to go out into the community. We see some things that can happen with each of these that really give a little bit more focus. I think we've done our job to really connect in on something that's really a concern around this table, and I think can then help to bridge out into the community as well.
That's great.
So is there an anticipation of concrete follow-up, not just in the community, but potentially within the district, within the framework of the district? I mean, whether it's administrative at the high school, whether it's transcending to all the schools, is there an anticipation that this is more, people who walk out of there tonight, they're gonna say, I can see where this is going, or are they gonna have more of a sense of?
They're gonna have more of a sense.
I see Kurt nodding his head up and down.
Is that because you're sleeping, or?
No, he was responding to it.
I don't know if when they leave, they will know exactly what's going to happen. But what our hope is that they are giving us ideas of what they want.
Okay.
Parents, community, students. So then we can take that then as a group, working with the CARES Coalition and the students to offer those back. You know, if they want a parent training on a topic or a community forum on a topic, then we as the three groups can organize and put that on to give back to meet, because we want this to meet the needs of what people think they need. And that's what the purpose of this is for us to have a clear vision of what parents would like, what students would like, what the community would like.
And that's a terrific response. I think that's something the attendees need to hear up front.
Sure.
Correct.
To feel that they're giving something of value then, and that they're not just giving it, but it's being attended to. And I wasn't questioning that would happen, but that's,
Yeah, good
what
point.
you've shared is a really big piece that will make that something more than
Goals.
a meeting.
And that should actually, if possible, be articulated in whatever invitation
Yeah,
goes
that's
out.
what I just wrote down to add that to what I wrote.
Outcomes.
You know,
Yep.
or article that gets written in the paper helping us to develop this.
But maybe some of those goals even are, what other questions did we not think of that you'd like to have more information on?
Right.
I
And
mean,
that is a goal.
yeah, that's a
What
goal.
else do we
Yeah.
need?
Thanks.
Okay, so, basically, what the goals committee was looking for, is that, this is not necessarily a special board meeting, we're not thinking, although it can be posted as a meeting where we have a note at the bottom that says a majority of board members may be present, so that, you know, whatever the appropriate language is, so that it's not necessary to schedule a special meeting, but, similar to how we've handled other such events, I think, at the high school and other topics.
I like that approach, because then you don't get into some of the awkwardness of the
Opening a
motions to
meeting.
open and close it. We can just run it as, it is a community linkage meeting that is being hosted by the board, and that there's no decisions being made, we can post it accordingly by that. So I guess all I'm looking for this evening is just, I guess, an endorsement from the board that just says that we should move ahead with this as really our agenda for the 5th, so that we can get our invitations out in the next day and start moving it forward with all of our planning aspects.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great, thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll be moving ahead on those right away.
Summer school report.
Sheila Wired is here. She has her report in your packet. So I'll just turn it over to Sheila for quick introductions, and then if there's any questions, you can direct them to Sheila for Summer School 2016.
Good evening. Hopefully you had a chance to look at it. It's a pretty simple one-sheet piece, and the good news is there. It was really a well-attended summer school, and we put in some efficiencies as well, which really boosted our FTE, which I think is an important piece. So I just kind of keep the data that I have, and I keep adding to it. 8 is not a special number. That's how long I had the data for you, and next year it will be 9 years worth. So our FTE went up to 167, which is a nice increase, and that's considering that we had one less day. One day of July 4th, or 2 depending when it will fall, really does affect summer school in the end, so even with one day less, that growth was really nice. Our enrollment continues to be good and strong. So going down below, kind of the 2 factors that were the biggest impact on jumping that FTE by 14, and that's considerable. Because for one FTE, it takes 48,600 minutes. That's a lot. Sounds like a cat song or something, I don't know. But by doing a new electronic sign-in, we always look for efficiencies with weightlifting or any program. We made the weightlifters much happier. Our customers were happier because they could do some things and get right to what they came to do instead of standing in a line. And then our elementary enrollment really increased. So those were the 2 big heavy lifters on that FTE going up. There's always new things, and I pared this down. Big, uncollected funds decreased by 92.46%, and that was done through a tiered system of support, along with some fee structure changes and personal phone calls. So eventually we got those in. We're in a consortium for summer school where we have shared costs for programming, and we also share ideas, which is great. There are several school districts that belong to that. Oregon hired a new programmer. We were on edge. Last time when I appeared before you in February, it was a pretty dicey time because we were about 4 months without a programmer, and we knew we were going live April 1st. The really good news is there were about 7 districts that were going live about 1 week before us. So they got that person on board and full time instead of a consultant now. Another big surprise for us happened after summer school was already rolling. the Department of Public Instruction decided to change its reporting system, which is due in a very formalized report on September 15th. It wasn't changed for Waunakee, it was changed for the state, and a lot of it revolves around budget. So yes, they do want to know how much glue you use per project in arts and crafts. So I'd like to say kudos to Denise Melhoff as we work through this very difficult situation, and we did well. All the refunds were processed by our summer school office by October 1st. That's another new little piece that was in there, got it done. In previous years, it would kind of take towards the end of the school year because of some of the hoops we needed to jump through, so that's really been streamlined. And then to give our high school interns or aides more of a real world experience, we created an online system for them instead of the old-fashioned time card. So that was really a great thing to do, and it also really helped out principals. We could track kids better. It helped out Greg Benz, who does some of the evaluations as well. So overall, a good year. And some of the challenges that we know we have for next year will revolve around the new DPI requirements in some of the ways that we either count programs in summer school or not. So we're going to take a look at those, and I'll have more information to give you regarding that when I come back to you in the winter, because we're working through some of those as well. But we anticipate another great year this next summer. This next summer we'll also not have a shared elementary program. The past couple summers we've been in 2 buildings instead of all 3, and now we'll be able to be in 3, which is really nice for younger kids to be in their home base, and the intermediate school students will be able to be in the intermediate building. And I know that they enjoyed the high school while they were in there, but it's really nice to have your home base. And it really helps whatever grade level is transitioning in, elementary, new kindergartners, intermediate, new 5th graders, to experience the space and create that sense of comfort. Getting to know the building is a big piece for them to feel comfortable when they start their school year. So questions for me on any of this?
So you did a great job reducing your uncollectibles by 92%. What was that, like reduced $10, $100, $10,000?
So on reducing that number, we did, instead of the multi-mailings, this mailing thing, and they got printed bills, and we did that a couple times, and we put, second notice and third notice. And then I just decided to do some batch emails.
So what's the value? Is it?
What's the value of it?
Yeah. What's the value?
In the
Thanks
first
for
couple
doing
years,
all
we would
that
go
great
with about 70,000 we hadn't collected. Last year, I think we got that down to 20, overstepping through the years. And so now it was just a few $100s. It was amazing. But in the end,
$20,000.
I made phone calls. It was not fun, nor do I look at this as a side job that I would enjoy, but it does work when they have a person on the other end, and their child, they needed to pay their fees or they could not attend summer school.
Yeah, I guess I presumed that's what we were
But that wasn't the issue, there were people who were obviously.
So you can pay online, and we cannot by law create a shopping cart where you must pay prior to being enrolled, because it would be discriminatory for anybody who could or would qualify for free or reduced. So we've worked on this with the Department of Public Instruction, and we're not allowed to do that because it seems pretty simple to me, just like you do any of your online shopping, because people register online. So they're allowed to register online, and they may pay at the time, most do, or they can delay that and still be registered, and that's where we run into this kind of bogged down piece. So that answers your question.
But that's just amazing that $70,000 went uncollected. Is there a way to capture that in fees?
So it didn't go uncollected forever. As Sheila mentioned, there was a first wave of bills, a second wave of bills. What she's referring to is by the time of the first day of summer school, there was a dramatic reduction in the number of continual requests to try to receive payment. So in the past, Denise Melhoff, who in this past summer did the majority of the collection prior to summer school, was still continuing to do it throughout summer school and in some cases even a little beyond. So it's not that there was a large number of uncollected dollars that never came in. It's more of when they came in and how many attempts and contacts Sheila in her office had to do to obtain the dollars. It was an effort to move it to the front end, which is very difficult for your department in summer school to do, given how much you have going on at that time of the year. But after honing down the process, that was the effort that really led to the dollars being collected up front. But it wasn't uncollected forever. It's just the timing of how long it took it to come in changed.
You know, I always asked, what was the improvement on the remediation people?
Okay.
How many remediation,
Yeah.
remediation classes as opposed to enrichment? And do we have any better sense of, to how well those students improved that were there
Yeah.
for remediation?
So I brought you my size 4 font. And the light's still good enough that I don't need readers, because I did just in the past week or so decide I should break down and get some, but I'm doing okay. First of all, our remedial numbers have dropped, and they've dropped at all levels. And part of that is because we do have RTI. When Janet was up here before and showed you that triangle, we have several interventions. So they have dropped, and they've dropped at every level, and those vary by percents. And then in terms of the success, for those that take remedial reading, take a remedial math, those types of pieces, at our K, and really it's grades 1 because it's exiting K, so our first graders through our 8th graders, they have standards that they need to meet. So it's very prescriptive. And then at the high school, it's also prescriptive. They have units that they need to complete in order to get their credits. And so we're at a 96% success rate, which is really good. But know that our numbers have dropped as well, which you would hope that they would through RTI.
Do we have a keyboarding class?
We do. We have had it
Is it well attended?
quite a while. No, it's not. And it's something that we've talked about. Do we need to expand it to the lower grade levels? So what we do is we have that at the intermediate, and it's keyboarding along with some fun projects and programming, because without that, our numbers seriously could have been 4, 5, 6 kids, and we try and bolster that up to at least 10 kids taking that class. So Paul Miller has done that for a number of years and has done a nice job on that. We don't track data on the success of keyboarding, though, like how many words per minute improvement type of piece, but we do offer that. And we've talked about, do we need to add that to our elementary, because keyboarding is now in our 3rd grade.
I apologize if this is too much of a detailed question, but when we talk about the remediation piece, do we track a student who, say, in grade 1 or 2 is reading below level, takes summer school? Do we see how they do in the next year compared to kids who don't take that?
Sure.
And so can we, do we then see a success that shows the worthwhile?
Extended, yes.
Sure. So what we do in reading in particular is our best data point. In our elementary and through intermediate, we have something called their BAS level, which is their fluency and comprehension. And we have an end of the year mark, and we have a beginning of the year mark. So kind of measuring, did summer maintain them? Did they slide? Did they grow? We haven't crunched those numbers individually yet, but we could do that.
I guess my concern, interest is, if we know someone is reading below level, are we tracking that individual student to try to get them above level or closer to level? And do we see the effectiveness of the summer school program in helping that to happen?
Yeah. So the answer is those things are discussed when we have our universal meetings in the fall, because you talk about each kid who might need an intervention or a booster group. We don't have that same model in math per se, to be able to compare an end of the year into a beginning of the year, unless we took a look at their STAR, which is a little bit broader, their STAR data that we do.
On the electronic time card, there was much discussion among several people in my house that more than 2 computers are necessary next year, just to let you know.
There were 4 at my building.
Oh, well, it must have
It's
been at the
probably
building they were at.
proportionate.
It was very hard for them to get their electronic time cards done in time for them to get to work. That was,
We'll
for
see if
some
we can
reason,
have a few more
major topic of complaint every week.
few more Chromebooks out there for them to
Yeah.
sign in.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila.
Any announcements? Okay, on to committee reports. Starting with budget committee, it does not look like there's any action items, but the minutes are there's some review. Okay, move on to curriculum committee.
I think, well, in budget there was with salary increases in the wellness thing, I think, which was 3-0 by both votes were 3-0. Where that goes with here, that's different.
Well, what we're gonna be doing when we get to later on in the agenda is taking action on some of that, plus the
Right.
wellness we did earlier.
Just as a thing, okay. Okay.
Curriculum committee.
We have an extraordinary number of course proposals that Tim will give a brief overview if you wish to have it. The committee voted 2-0 to approve all and bring it to the board for board approval pending budgetary ability to cover the courses.
We had a summary memo plus the individual new course applications in your packet. So I'm just going to go over these very lightly, and then if you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to cover these. Some of these you've heard about before. So when Alyssa Band and Rhonda Knapp were back in the spring, there were a few new ag courses they talked about. Those are in the mix this year. We also, as part of our Innovation Center piece, shared with you there'd be some new course proposals coming through with kind of some of the curricular changes that we'd see coming with the Innovation Center. The first is this Fab Lab 1 course. It's probably going to be called Idea 1. As Jeff and Caleb have been talking about that, they wanted to come up with something that's a little more distinctive, and I think I noted that in the memo. We also have something that we mentioned in the STEAM presentation 2 months ago, which is the principles of biomedical science. The Project Lead the Way biomedical course. It's a really good match for some of our kids, in particular looking at health professions. We also have an advanced health course that builds on opportunities above and beyond our quarter credit required health course. It's not a substitution for that. And it also does involve some career exploration in health areas. So we've got a few courses that hit that. Another thing that's in here is as the high school English team has looked at their scope and sequence, they've looked at the American character and the American novel courses, and they would like to sunset those 2 courses and bring in an American literature course, which will in part draw on existing texts and the syllabi of the 2 courses, but kind of integrate them into a single offering. And so that's health, that's biomedical. I think I've covered all of them in a real high-level view, just in terms of potential ways to approach these fiscally. The English course really replaces existing courses. That's a net. The other ones are in the elective areas. We envision kind of in the overall high school staffing allocation, we may see some movement of FTE or movement within content areas of instructor FTE, but we think the overall FTE impact, when you look at the high school as a whole, is going to be neutral. Now, there will be some implementation costs for these courses in terms of relatively small supply line items. We envision dealing with those strictly on a reallocation basis. For some of our more startup costs, like some of the supplies for a Project Lead the Way course, like Intro to Biomedical Science. That's a more considerable cost, so that would be something we'd address in the C&I textbook budget. That is the quick summary, and certainly looking forward to any questions you have. Dave?
I'm guessing it's probably a typo, but biotechnology applications and biotech applications are the same class? Because it's listed twice in the minutes. There weren't two separate classes, were there?
No, there should be, well, there's a biomedical, Intro to Biomedical Science, and there's a biotech applications.
So it is two.
Okay, so there
Yeah.
were two.
Yeah, so let me, right, I didn't talk about the biotech application. So, biotech is a course we already have in our catalog at the high school. It is a concurrent enrollment course with Madison College, which has some requirements. It's also, because of some of the labs associated with that course, one of the 3 semester-length courses that in our program constitute the AP biology sequence. So in some high schools, AP biology would be a full year course. In our program, it's actually 3 one-semester courses: AP Bio, Biotech, Anatomy and Physiology. Over the years, we've had students who are interested in getting more exposure to biotechnology as a subject, but the AP labs and some of the other pieces that come along with the biotechnology course we currently offer haven't really been something they were interested in. So this is an attempt to kind of meet that interest with a different course.
Okay, so basically the minutes of the curriculum probably, it has biotech applications and biotechnology applications, but doesn't mention the biomedical.
Yeah, that's
So
a typo. I'll have to go back and fix that and reissue that.
That's why my numbers couldn't come. Okay.
Really?
I did express concern about that class in particular because it felt like it was a decrease in rigor of something we're already offering. And I always have concerns when we do that. We realize the length is long of these lists, but again, they're going to rise and fall and succeed based on their ability to attract students. So also shared the concern about the costs involved with different instructors will be putting in to be paid to write the new curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
So there is an expectation that there will be some further sifting and winnowing based on our budget and ability to help assist with that curriculum writing.
Correct.
So,
New course proposals always have first draw on the curriculum project allocations.
I have one comment, one question.
Mm-hmm.
In the American literature, there was like an added material textbook thing where the math didn't add. It's either a typo in it where it's like 1 or 2 at $12 equals $2,400 to $4,800. I'm not sure what that was, so it's just clarification.
So I think those are Brian's notes, and Brian just wanted to put a note on there that there could be a fiscal impact. I know when I've spoken with Walter,
and I know you
Laura,
go through. Okay.
they still need to kind of, they're in the process of reviewing whether they need to purchase new text or whether they really want to kind of look at the text that we already have for the 2 courses that are sunsetting and really kind of remix those.
Okay. And then the other thing was, I appreciate when, rather than just adding that there's also, we're gonna sunset some, I appreciate when that information is shared too, because, it's like, that's what you'd expect to have happen, so appreciate that.
Thank you.
So, there is a request for action to approve of all the new course additions, as presented, right?
Yes.
Is there a motion?
so moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve of the new course approval of new courses as presented, assuming the funds are available. Any discussion, questions? Gary?
I just got one. Are any of these addressing classes that people are going off to college that we end up paying for?
In terms of reducing our youth options or course options exposure. I would say in looking at this list, none of these are in and of themselves going to tackle a large number. I would say the ones that have probably had a bigger impact on that would be when we had like the AP government, 2 years ago. But I would say that in some of these cases, in terms of maybe the food science or, possibly the biomedical, we may be forestalling 1 or 2 kids that might apply for Madison College course, but not so much. I mean, this is more, a lot of these are in the ag area. It's really a result of Alyssa coming in and working with Rhonda and coming up with some ideas to kind of broaden and revitalize.
There's a possibility, Gary, because we get some of the ag kids from Middleton.
Yep.
So I was wondering, yeah.
So it
So
could
we
ex-
attract them in.
So it could attract some in potentially if we have room.
Any other comments? Okay, the motion's on the table, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Okay, several items under the HR committee. First of all, I think there's the October 19th, 2016 meeting minutes. There's a corrected copy in front of you, and the only difference is that we wanted to make sure all the names were correctly presented on, in terms of who was present at that negotiations meeting. The item underneath that is an item which was actually discussed and approved at the committee level at our October 7th meeting, 3-0, but it didn't appear as an action item at the full board level, and that's the community ed aquatics supervisor position. There's information in your packet on that. So I guess, are there questions on the information that was presented for that additional individual to provide support to Christine Acker? The Aquatic Center. It did pass 3-0 at our HR meeting, so if there are no questions, is there a motion to approve of the request at the full board level?
Motion to approve the request for the aquatic supervisor job.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Questions?
I guess I just would say, it's, just knowing from past experience, it's probably a really good idea, because those keys sometimes had a way of getting tossed from lifeguard to lifeguard and having less than consistent protocols and safety measures, and so I think it's definitely something we need to do. Christy's only one person, she's very dedicated, she works really hard, but,
She needs.
everybody
Yeah.
gets a fever every now and then or something.
And there's also a lot of demand for that particular
That's right.
facility.
That's right.
And you will also see that paid through Fund 80, so it doesn't affect any of our
Yep.
other programs. Okay, all in favor of the recommendation, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. The November 8th meeting minutes, the first item is considering the language for payout of points at retirement. I think this has been discussed, Randy, at several times.
Yeah, I think this was actually brought forward at a previous meeting, probably this summer, early summer. And there was a desire to, at that point, look at 2 different options for the payout of banked points at retirement. One through a piece with WRS and the other one through an HRA option. As we've vetted that out through just further research and working with our staff committee, and we're recommending tonight to stay with option 1, which is the one that ties those points payouts to the HRA option.
Is there a motion to approve of that language?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
So this point stuff, it did end up going to that points committee, and the employee groups were fine with option 1.
Yes.
Yeah, Joan, you were part of that committee, right?
Yeah, I missed the meeting.
Okay, well.
I missed, yeah, but I missed the meeting.
Well, we heard,
Are you fine with it, Joan?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Well,
We're good.
okay, so any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item B, you will see in your packet, there was a tentative agreement for a .12 base wage increase for the teachers. That's what we are allowed to negotiate.
So that's the highest level
The
we're
highest
allowed to
level we're allowed to
negotiate.
negotiate, but there's more coming in the next item, so. But we do need to take action on that tentative agreement with the WTA for 2016-17. Is there a motion to approve of that tentative agreement, base wage increase?
So moved. Second.
Duly seconded by Joan. Any comments, questions?
Just that it would be nice if someday the state decided to step out of it and let a local board actually handle their dealings with their whole budget instead of being tied in one area. Hey, but that was just a comment.
All in favor of that, right? Okay, any other comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 2016-17 compensation for all employee groups. Did you want to present that, Steve? I mean, the information has been presented to both the Budget Committee and PAS 3.0 and HR 3.0. So, Randy?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we gave a preview to at a previous meeting when we were going through all the budget work in the last month. And as Peggy said, the HR committee's had a chance to review it, as has the Budget Committee. This includes the supplemental pay for our teachers, that's what we call our points system, at $1,500. It has a 2% increase for all of our other employee groups. This also includes the aspects of the second phase of our QTI study for administrative assistants, the averaging aspect for our admin staff, an adjustment to 2 of our tech positions per some Fair Labor and Standards Act adjustments, and then setting aside $30,000 to $40,000 that would be for future pay if the board, at the board's discretion, regarding the next level of the QTI study for our other employee groups that we're studying this year.
Is there a motion to approve of that package?
Second.
Jack, seconded by Joan. Further discussion?
Just thank you to Steve for providing the info that we requested at the last board meeting, so we could see some of the longitudinal data from previous years. Much appreciated.
Did you have a comment, Dave?
Yeah, when I was looking at the total dollar increase percentage and everything, I just found it a little ironic that the 2 lowest groups were the ones we're doing a QTI study on to get them caught up on catch-up pay. I just thought that was kind of humorous in a weird way. But I guess since we're going to be addressing that, when are we expecting that study to come around?
I would ask Connie to weigh in on that. Connie's working with them on it.
I looked at you only because you're
Yep,
closer.
no, that's okay.
It's easier. You're so close. And you always say that I have good questions.
We're expecting initial results back from the QTI study in January with hopefully recommendations in February.
And
Okay.
that's for which group again?
This is for the QTI group, the classified staff, that the study is underway right now. And that's what you're asking about,
Paras
right?
and
Oh, yes,
custodians.
yes.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Any other questions?
So just for clarification, is it 30 to 40 sort of a balancing off based upon the expected for adding to it based on the report?
I think it's because we didn't really have anything set aside when we did the first one, and we want to have something set aside to account for possibly what.
This brings us, go ahead.
Go, Steve. Yeah,
The range is just indicated as discretion for the board when the report comes back. And we did talk in the budget committee that, you know, the board would not necessarily be limited, that we could certainly look at other options given the results of the study. One of the comments we heard previously was when we had a QTI study ongoing, we did not have funds set aside for later in that fiscal year when the results come back. We did talk about this topic in the committees and indicated that, you know, the scope of what we expect to come back certainly cannot be managed by that dollar amount, but it is a dollar amount that as a board, if there are high priorities, let's say in an example, we see the electrician is significantly off or maybe others, the board could prioritize some action yet this fiscal year to be taken to close the gaps for those areas that are of greatest need.
Okay, would, basically, I'm gonna ask for approval or not, and then we have two that will need to abstain from this, because we're spouses that are employed. Any other discussion on the compensation package proposal? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Abstain. Sorry.
You change your vote?
No, I didn't. There's a ventriloquist over there.
Okay, motion's carried, thank you. Policy committee.
Policy committee met, there was really, the piece that's in front of you tonight is really just wanting to have the board's endorsement of conversation we had with regards to the Warrior Stadium donor recognition. One of the things we want to be able to provide that community group is what are they able to talk to their donors about as far as recognition. Scoreboard is already within our policy to do that. We also have past experience with pavers, like landscape pavers and donor walls. We also have experience with things that have been associated with our light poles, such as at the baseball field. And the committee also discussed that signage along a fence would be amenable, depending on how that looked. But discussion with regards to anything on a main entryway or with regards to actual advertising on the field itself was not something the committee was interested in at this time. So I just wanted to, in fairness to that community committee, wanted to really have that brought forward here so that we're comfortable specifically with kind of those as their parameters. And then obviously anything that they would do, they would bring back in a visual depiction so that you can see what it looks like before it actually takes place.
So it's not, we're not looking for action or anything, but just feedback or volume?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're on the same page and that if those are coming forward, that we generally have, are comfortable with that being explored.
It was more the permanence of some of those other things that was.
And what I would see is just like with things like at the baseball field, when those actual designs or pieces came forward, those would come back through like the facility committee. But this is generally what the committee was comfortable with, giving them as parameters, and then we'll bring that back as those further get designed out. But wanted to make sure that the full board was aware of that, as in the advertising, et cetera, from that community group was brought forward.
Are there any questions on that?
So just to be clear, I was there. If in the end, any signage or any advertising, we would still have to specifically look at, just so it's like Miller Lite High School football team would not be a great idea. So.
You'll get to be able to see kind of, if you're looking at things along a fence, you'll see kind of what that looks like. I think that was brought up, is that you were comfortable with something along there, as long as it was done tastefully.
Okay, there was another item on the agenda, on the policy committee meeting that we just discussed, and it was use of facility regulations.
Yeah, one of the things that Aaron May and I brought forward was just wanting to discuss with the committee the use of facilities. We've had just, as he's had some experience now working through implementation of that policy, there's some things that we felt that we need to bring forward with regards to just some clarification and growing number of groups that use our facilities that we think we can improve upon. We also had discussion just with regards to use of the pool and some of the aspects related to that. So the committee has asked us to further investigate those issues and bring back a draft policy for the committee to review in the future. Aaron is looking at also some of the fee structures with regards to that, because those have not been reviewed in a few years, and we're looking to actually break those pieces out. And when Steve brings forward as part of the budget process every spring, we'll bring the kind of the rental fees that we want to be charging, so that we can review those on an annual basis. I think that's just that was a good catch as we discussed that policy. I feel we have no recommendation here this evening, that will be coming probably in the next month or two.
Goals Committee, I think we've discussed and taken action to approve the meeting. Any other comments from the Goals Committee?
No, I hope you all can make it December 5th, put a big gold star on your calendar and.
Okay, on to consent agenda. Consent agenda has checks, monthly finance reports, including the district census report, a request to purchase a maintenance truck, gifts and field trips, and the staff changes. The updated one was in front of us at our spots today. As always, you can have a motion to approve the entire consent agenda as presented, or pull something off for separate consideration.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Just a quick question on the Ford truck that you're purchasing. What is, he's paying $47,000 for that? Purchase a truck, he stated to Milton Ford for a cost of 47. Is that what he's doing?
That includes the box
And plowing and stuff, but
Give me info on that.
That's one time.
Yes, it does include everything that would go with it, including the plow, the box in the back. So there is a vehicle, if you look at the bottom of the picture, that's last year's model of what they are requesting to purchase in the maintenance department. There were bids completed. The staff themselves prefer the purchase through the Middleton Ford. It is not the lowest bid, but is the recommendation from the staff in that department to have consistent equipment and to try to go with a common line. So the staff are recommending the Ford, but as I noted in the minutes, I mean, we do have bids as required by board policy. The Ford is not the low bid of the choices, but it is the request of the staff to go with that purchase.
Have we been happy with the performance of our past Fords?
The maintenance staff who use them have been, and they prefer those
Consistency.
trucks over the others, but as a part of our process, we do go out and seek bids to compare it. This year, the Ford was more expensive, but for a desire to maintain consistency, that is the request that you're seeing tonight.
Does that also, because then you can work with the same dealer for other follow-up, maintenance and repairs?
Can we use it as a lever to renegotiate with Ford?
It's a good question. We
You know what I
certainly.
mean?
Yeah, the cost of that particular vehicle increased quite a bit from last year to this year because of a complete redesign. So the cost actually went up quite a bit from the year before. It actually costs more than the Dodge now. The hope would be that that was the major price increase was this year, and that it'd be more competitive in the future. If we continue to see this type of difference, it may be worth exploring, but in the past, the Ford was the lowest price bid. Just this year, it didn't come in that way.
I heard to tell them that.
Yep.
We prefer you.
Yep.
You've always been lower. Can you work with us?
Yep.
Any other comments? Questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda approved. Board business, as a reminder, the convention is coming up for those of you who, I think we all get the school news. Basically, in the November 2016 issue gives you a highlight of the kinds of presentations, information on registration. If you want to go to the conference, you will register through Rebecca. And just as a reminder, early registration, which has some discounted prices, is Friday, December 9th, the state conference. But all the information, if you're ever interested in getting into it, is in this most recent school news publication.
Is it a Wednesday, Thursday?
It's a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
For the whole
Right.
Pre-convention
You're going
stuff
big.
is Tuesday
I'm gonna go a week
afternoon.
early.
Those
Yeah.
opening workshops are Tuesday afternoon, and then it closes Friday at noon.
Okay, so any legislative updates? Well, yeah.
Let's not talk about that.
Just sit there and say, it's
Okay, any future agendas and meetings?
I think with Thanksgiving coming up in a week, and we have then the linkage meeting to plan for the 5th, I don't see, do you have anything, Steve, that you need?
I'll tell you the budget.
I think we have an HR meeting scheduled already
Would
for.
like to get a budget.
It's
meeting.
on
We
December
need budget
6th,
committee in
and
between.
I think we can do that.
Pardon?
It is on the calendar for December 6th, but I think we can cancel that one. We don't need a meeting quite yet.
Okay, so Jack and
It's okay.
Joan, HR 8 to 9:30 on the 6th, we don't have to do. Thank you. Sorry, were there other meetings?
Like Steve said, he needed budget.
Okay.
Yes, and it's likely that we would need to set aside at least 2 hours, so I want to
Yep.
make sure that we have enough time
Mhm.
to cover all of the various topics.
So when do you wanna do it?
So,
Anywhere before?
ideally, it would be before the December board meeting, because there's likely going to be pieces that would come to the board meeting. So either the week of the 28th or the week of the 5th would be ideal.
Not the week of the 5th, Steve. Well, I guess it can't, yeah. Are you looking at morning or are we looking at evening?
Whatever the committee prefers.
I'm
Well,
most flexible, so.
If you're looking at
Jones,
the week
morning's
of the,
okay anymore?
Morning is okay with me.
if you're
Something like
looking
8
at-
o'clock on a, whatever, 8 to 10?
You could take the HR committee's time on December 6th, now that meeting's
Hey,
on
all
your
right.
calendar.
Yeah,
let's
would
do
be
that,
awesome.
since I
There
have
you
that
are.
all crossed out.
That's great.
Good job,
Do
Steve.
that.
Thank you, Connie.
Love to
It's overtime probably.
From 8 to 10.
That worked out nice.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome to come, Connie, if you really wanted to go to a meeting.
I think that's all we need.
Okay, and then as I just wanna make a comment, let's see, apparently there's some goodies over there for anybody who's here remaining in the room here from Findorf. And that's, whatever what's the page, I don't know what's in there, but
From
it's
what
just
school?
It's just stuff, it's
Good luck with
cookies.
cookies.
good looking cookies, so everybody who's here, including our videographers, if you wanna take some treats before you leave.
There's a curriculum one scheduled already previously for the 30th as well, so.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second?
Motion moved and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Good night.
What's the date due, what are they coming, what's the one?
I think I have that.
Yeah, quick.
It's on the agenda.
Well, it's 18th to the 20th, but what's, I should look at the agenda and see what I wanna see, is that what it is, or is there stuff to go, I gotta be at the legislative one anyway, right?
If you
don't
have
that magazine she talked about, I have a copy just down here in the cabinet.
Yeah, should I take that?
They were all fine with all
I'll have
that.
to figure that out.
One thing is,
And you're going on the thing?
was that you can't
Are you
do
staying?
all in
Yeah.
one test.
Yeah, that's all bad.